Welcome, fellow dreamer. Tonight, we journey to the golden sands of ancient Egypt, where mighty pharaohs once ruled and timeless pyramids rose toward the heavens along the life-giving waters of the Nile. This story unfolds through soothing music and gentle, abstract imagery, revealing fascinating wonders and captivating tales from one of history's most remarkable civilizations. As you listen, let these ancient mysteries quietly satisfy your curiosity while guiding you peacefully toward rest. So take a deep breath, settle into your pillow, and allow yourself to sink into complete comfort. Let your mind wander freely and your eyes grow heavy as this tale of pharaohs, temples, and timeless traditions gently carries you into sleep. Long before the great pyramids rose against the desert sky, long before the pharaohs wore their crowns of white and red, the Nile River flowed through a landscape that would have seemed almost unrecognizable to later Egyptian eyes. Picture, if you will, a time more than 10,000 years ago, when the climate of North Africa was not the arid expanse we know today, but something altogether different, where endless sand dunes now stretch toward distant horizons. There once existed grasslands dotted with acacia trees, seasonal lakes that shimmered under the African sun, and a surprising abundance of wildlife. The people who wandered these ancient grasslands were hunters and gatherers, moving with the seasons, following the migrations of animals and the ripening of wild plants. They lived in small family groups, carrying their few possessions with them, seeking shelter in temporary camps and shallow caves. Their tools were fashioned from stone, carefully chipped and shaped into blades and scrapers. They knew the land intimately, understanding which roots could sustain them through difficult times, which berries were safe to eat, where the herds of gazelle and antelope would gather to drink. But the climate was changing, slowly and inexorably. Over countless generations, the rains that once nourished the grasslands became less frequent, less reliable. The lakes began to shrink, their edges retreating inward year by year. The great herds moved away or dwindled in number. The people who had once ranged freely across this generous landscape found themselves drawn increasingly toward the one constant source of water that remained, the great river that flowed from the heart of Africa northward to the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile, fed by rains falling far to the south in the highlands of what we now call Ethiopia and Uganda, was unlike any other river these early people had known. Each year, with remarkable predictability, it would swell with floodwaters, overflowing its banks and spreading across the adjacent lands. When the waters receded, they left behind something precious, a layer of rich, dark silt, fertile soil carried all the way from the interior of the continent. This annual gift transformed the narrow strip of land along the river into an oasis of green abundance amid an increasingly harsh and forbidding desert. The transition from wandering to settling was not sudden. It happened gradually, almost imperceptibly, over many human lifetimes. Perhaps it began with certain families returning to the same favorable locations along the riverbank year after year. They noticed that wild grasses grew especially thick in the silt-enriched soil left by the floods. Someone whose name is lost to the vast sweep of time, made a crucial observation. The seeds of these grasses could be collected, stored, and deliberately planted. This simple realization changed everything. Agriculture had arrived in the Nile Valley, probably around 8,000 years ago, though the exact timing remains a subject of scholarly investigation. The people began to cultivate emmer wheat and barley, plants that had originated in the Near East, and found the conditions along the Nile wonderfully suitable. They domesticated animals too: cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs. With domesticated plants and animals, the need to constantly move in search of food diminished. Permanent settlements began to appear along the riverbanks. These early villages were modest affairs, clusters of simple structures made from bundled reeds and mud bricks dried in the abundant sunshine. The houses were small and practical, designed to provide shelter from the heat of the day and the cool of the desert night. Families stored their grain in clay pots and woven baskets, a revolutionary development that allowed them to maintain food supplies between harvests. This storage capacity meant survival was no longer solely dependent on the daily hunt or the immediate availability of wild foods. Life in these settlements developed its own rhythms, dictated by the Nile itself. The ancient Egyptians would eventually divide their year into 3 seasons based on the river's cycle, and these distinctions were already becoming apparent to the prehistoric farmers. There was Akhenaten, the inundation season, when the river flooded and the fields were covered with water. During this time, farming was impossible, and people turned to other tasks: repairing tools, making pottery, weaving baskets and textiles. Then came Pharaohs, the growing season, when the waters receded and crops could be planted in the moist, fertile soil. Finally, there was Shemu, the harvest season, when the grain ripened under the intensifying sun and had to be gathered before the next flood arrived. Understanding and working with this cycle required observation, planning, and cooperation. The early farmers along the Nile began to develop irrigation techniques, digging simple channels to direct water to their fields, creating basins to capture and hold the floodwaters, so their benefits could extend beyond the immediate aftermath of the inundation. This was perhaps humanity's first engineering along the Nile, humble precursors to the sophisticated irrigation systems that would later support millions of people. As villages became more established and populations grew, society became more complex. Not everyone needed to be directly involved in farming. Some individuals specialized in making pottery, crafting it with increasing skill, and decorating it with geometric patterns and images of the animals and plants that filled their world. Others became expert toolmakers or fishermen who knew the river's moods and the habits of its abundant fish. Trade networks developed, with communities exchanging goods: fish for grain, pottery for tools, stones suitable for making implements passing from hand to hand over considerable distances. Archaeological evidence from this period, known to modern scholars as the pre-dynastic era, reveals a people developing distinctive cultural practices. They buried their dead with care, placing them in simple graves along with items they might need: pots of food, tools, jewelry made from shells and stones. These burials suggest emerging beliefs about existence beyond death, ideas that would eventually flower into the elaborate funerary traditions for which Egypt would become famous. The villages were not isolated from one another. Over time, connections formed, alliances developed, and larger communities emerged. Some settlements grew more prosperous or powerful than others, perhaps because they controlled particularly favorable stretches of farmland, or because they sat at important trading crossroads. Leadership structures developed, though we can only speculate about their exact nature. Were the early leaders skilled farmers who demonstrated superior knowledge, successful traders, individuals who could organize communal projects like irrigation canal construction? We cannot know with certainty, but we can observe that by around 4000 BCE, distinct cultural regions were forming along the Nile. The river valley was naturally divided into two main sections by geography and character. Upper Egypt, the southern region, was a narrow corridor where the river carved its way through limestone cliffs, and the cultivable land hugged the water's edge in a slender green ribbon. Lower Egypt, in the north, was dominated by the vast fan of the Nile Delta, where the river split into multiple branches as it approached the Mediterranean, creating a broad expanse of marshy, extraordinarily fertile land. These two regions, while sharing the gift of the Nile, developed somewhat different cultures and would come to be symbolized as separate kingdoms, setting the stage for one of the most significant events in Egyptian history. As the 4th millennium BCE progressed, the stage was being set for transformation. The scattered farming villages were evolving into towns. Leaders were becoming kings. Competition for resources and prestige was intensifying. The foundations laid by countless generations of river dwellers, those patient farmers and herders who had learned to work in harmony with the Nile's rhythms, were about to support something unprecedented, a unified state that would become one of the ancient world's most enduring civilizations. The vast river valley had nurtured separate communities for countless generations, each cluster of settlements developing its own traditions, its own protector spirit, its own ways of organizing life along the fertile banks. In the north, where the great river spread into multiple channels before meeting the Mediterranean Sea, communities had learned to navigate the complex waterways of the delta. Here, in what would become known as Lower Egypt, the land was flat and marshy, rich with papyrus reeds and teeming with waterfowl. The people wore the red crown of the delta, and their principal deity was the cobra goddess Wadjet. Far to the south, where the river flowed through a narrower valley bounded by desert cliffs on either side, a different culture had taken root. This was Upper Egypt, despite being geographically lower on modern maps, named for its position upstream where the Nile descended from the African highlands. Here the people identified with the vulture goddess Nekhbet and wore the tall white crown that would become one of Egypt's most recognizable symbols. Between these two lands lay hundreds of miles of river, countless villages and towns, and profound differences in dialect, customs, and governance. Yet the same river nourished both regions, and the same seasonal rhythms governed both territories. The logic of eventual unity was perhaps inevitable, written into the very geography that made these lands simultaneously distinct and interdependent. Trade had long connected north and south, carrying delta fish upstream and upper Egyptian grain downstream. Cultural exchange followed commercial contact, and with it came both cooperation and competition for resources and influence. The unification that occurred around the year 3100 BCE remains shrouded in the mists of time, that twilight zone where history and legend intertwine so closely that separating them becomes nearly impossible. Later Egyptian tradition attributed this momentous achievement to a king called Narmer, though some ancient records refer to him as Menes, and scholars continue to debate whether these were the same person, different names for one ruler, or perhaps two separate kings whose accomplishments became merged in cultural memory. What we do possess from this pivotal era is a remarkable artifact, a ceremonial palette carved from a single piece of mudstone. Discovered at Hieroglyphics in 1898, the Narmer palette stands as one of our earliest windows into this transformative moment. On one side, the king wears the white crown of Upper Egypt as he raises his arm to strike a kneeling captive. On the reverse, he processes in the red crown of Lower Egypt, inspecting rows of decapitated enemies. The symbolism speaks clearly across the millennia. One ruler now claimed dominion over both lands. Whether this unification came through military conquest, political marriage, diplomatic negotiation, or some combination of all three remains uncertain. The Narmer palette certainly emphasizes military victory, but such ceremonial objects often presented idealized narratives rather than documentary accounts. What matters more than the specific means is the profound result. Two distinct regions with their own identities and traditions had been brought together under a single administration, creating something entirely new in human civilization. The unified kingdom required new symbols to represent this unprecedented political reality. The solution came in the form of the double crown, the Vschent, which combined the white crown of the south and the red crown of the north into a single striking headdress. When the pharaoh wore this crown, he embodied both regions simultaneously. He became not merely a king of one land who had conquered another, but a sovereign who represented the essential unity of both territories. This was a distinction of enormous importance, suggesting integration rather than simple domination. To govern this expanded realm, a new capital was established at a location of both practical and symbolic significance. The city that would be known as Memphis arose at the junction point between Upper and Lower Egypt, roughly where the valley narrowed as it approached the delta. Later tradition credited Narmer himself with founding Memphis, though archaeological evidence suggests the city developed gradually rather than appearing fully formed at a single moment. Regardless of its precise origins, Memphis would serve as Egypt's administrative heart for much of the Old Kingdom period. The location chosen for Memphis demonstrated sophisticated political thinking. By placing the capital at the boundary between the two lands, rather than in the heart of either, the new government signaled that it represented both equally. The city controlled access to the delta from the south and to the valley from the north, making it ideally positioned for both commerce and defense. Here, the products of both regions could be gathered, redistributed, and taxed. Here, scribes could maintain records, and officials could coordinate the administration of territories stretching hundreds of miles in both directions. With unification came the foundations of centralized authority that would characterize Egyptian governance for the next 3 millennia. A unified kingdom required a more complex bureaucracy than the chiefdoms that had preceded it. Officials needed to be appointed to govern distant regions on behalf of the pharaoh. Systems of taxation had to be developed to gather resources from the entire country and redistribute them according to royal priorities. Standards of measurement needed to be established so that grain from southern storehouses could be accurately accounted for alongside oil from northern producers. The king himself took on new dimensions of authority, no longer merely the strongest chieftain or the most successful local ruler. He became something approaching divine, a bridge between the human and cosmic realms. The pharaoh was understood as the earthly embodiment of Horus, the falcon god, and this divine association helped legitimate his rule over peoples who might otherwise have felt little connection to a distant monarch. Religious authority and political power became inseparable, each reinforcing the other in a system that would prove remarkably stable. From this moment of unification, Egyptian civilization acquired characteristics that would define it throughout its long history. The concept of Ma'at, representing truth, justice, order, and cosmic balance, became central to how Egyptians understood proper governance. The pharaoh's primary responsibility was maintaining Ma'at, ensuring that the forces of chaos did not overwhelm the carefully constructed order of civilization. This was expressed through proper performance of religious rituals, just governance, successful defense of the realm, and the undertaking of building projects that demonstrated Egypt's prosperity and the pharaoh's effectiveness as an intermediary with the divine. The unification also established patterns of artistic representation that would persist for centuries. The conventions we see emerging on the Nama palette, showing the king as larger than other figures and presenting the human body in that characteristic Egyptian style with the head in profile but the torso frontal, became standard. These were not primitive attempts at realistic depiction, but deliberate artistic choices that conveyed information about status, identity, and the proper order of things. As night settles over the ancient landscape, and we imagine Memphis in its earliest days, we can picture a city taking shape beside the eternal river. Mud brick buildings rising along planned streets, officials gathering in the palace to receive instructions from their sovereign, scribes learning to record information in an increasingly sophisticated writing system. The two lands that had developed separately for so long were learning to function as one, and from this unity would emerge achievements that still inspire wonder today. The dawn broke over the newly unified lands of Egypt, and with it came an age that would forever transform the desert sands into a gallery of eternal monuments. The third dynasty rose around 2686 BCE, marking the beginning of what history would remember as the Old Kingdom, a period stretching across 4 dynasties and nearly 5 centuries. This was the age when the pharaohs would reshape not just the landscape, but the very conception of what a ruler could be and what their legacy might become. In these early years of the Old Kingdom, the concept of divine kingship crystallized into something absolute and unchanging. The pharaoh was no longer simply a powerful ruler who had unified 2 lands through conquest and diplomacy. Now, the king stood as a living god, a bridge between the mortal world and the realm of the divine. This transformation in how Egyptians viewed their ruler would have profound implications for everything that followed, from the organization of government to the mobilization of resources on a scale previously unimaginable. The pharaohs of this era drew their divine authority from their association with Horus, the falcon-headed sky god, whose eyes were said to be the sun and moon. Each king was considered the earthly embodiment of Horus, and upon death would join with Osiris in the afterlife. This theological framework gave the pharaoh not just political legitimacy, but cosmic significance. Every command issued by the king carried the weight of divine will, and to serve the pharaoh was to serve the gods themselves. Memphis, the capital established during the Unification, flourished as the administrative heart of this increasingly complex state. The city bustled with officials, scribes, and administrators who formed the bureaucracy necessary to govern the entire length of the Nile Valley. These were men trained in the art of writing and calculation, capable of recording grain harvests, organizing labor forces, and ensuring that the will of the pharaoh reached even the most distant villages. The efficiency of this administrative system allowed Egypt to function as a unified whole, pooling resources from the delta in the north to the first cataract in the south. The wealth that flowed into royal coffers during the Old Kingdom came primarily from agriculture, that gift of the Nile's annual flooding. But it also came from trade expeditions that ventured far beyond Egypt's borders. Cedar wood arrived from the forests of Lebanon, for Egypt's own trees were poor for large construction projects. Copper came from the Sinai Peninsula, where mining expeditions worked under harsh desert conditions to extract the precious metal used for tools and weapons. From Nubia to the south came gold, ebony, and ivory, luxuries that demonstrated Egypt's reach and power. With these resources at their disposal, the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom began to contemplate monuments that would declare their divine nature and ensure their eternal existence. The flat-topped mastaba tombs that had served earlier rulers seemed inadequate for kings who were now seen as gods. Something grander was needed, something that would rise toward the heavens and stand as an unmistakable statement of royal power and divine connection. The stage was being set for an architectural revolution that would define Egypt in the imagination of all future generations. The organization required for these monumental projects reveals much about Old Kingdom society. Recent archaeological evidence has shown that the common image of slaves toiling under the whip to build pyramids is a misconception. Instead, these great works were constructed by a rotating labor force of free Egyptian citizens, primarily farmers, who worked on royal building projects during the inundation season, when their fields lay under Nile water. This system transformed the annual flood from merely an agricultural blessing into an opportunity for national projects that unified the people in service to their god-king. These workers were organized into crews with names that reflected pride and competition, groups that modern archaeologists have discovered through inscriptions left at building sites. They received payment in the form of food rations, bread and beer being the staples that fueled their efforts. Entire temporary cities sprang up near construction sites, complete with bakeries, breweries, and workshops. The logistics of feeding and housing thousands of workers for months at a time required sophisticated planning and a reliable supply chain that stretched back to farms throughout Egypt. The Fourth Dynasty, beginning around 2613 BCE, would see the pyramid building tradition reach its absolute zenith, But before those most famous monuments rose at Giza, the Third Dynasty would witness crucial developments that made such achievements possible. Engineers and architects experimented with stone construction techniques, learning how to quarry massive blocks, transport them across considerable distances, and fit them together with remarkable precision. Each project built upon the lessons of the previous one, a gradual accumulation of knowledge and expertise. The religious significance of these building projects cannot be overstated. The pyramid shape itself held deep meaning, possibly representing the primordial mound that emerged from the waters of chaos at creation, or perhaps serving as a stairway or ramp by which the deceased pharaoh's spirit could ascend to join the sun god Ra in his eternal journey across the sky. Every aspect of royal tomb construction was imbued with symbolic meaning, from the alignment of passages to celestial bodies to the inscriptions and images that decorated interior chambers. The priests who served the mortuary cults of deceased pharaohs formed an important part of Old Kingdom society. Each royal pyramid complex included a temple where offerings were made to sustain the king's spirit in the afterlife. These temples were endowed with lands and staff, creating institutions that would continue functioning long after the pharaoh's death. The wealth devoted to maintaining these cults represented a significant portion of Egypt's resources, but it was considered essential, for the well-being of the deceased kings was thought to ensure the continued prosperity of Egypt itself. As the Old Kingdom progressed through its early dynasties, a certain rhythm established itself in Egyptian society. The predictable flooding of the Nile, the annual cycle of planting and harvest, and the ongoing construction of royal monuments created a sense of permanence and order. This was Ma'at made manifest, that essential Egyptian concept of balance, truth, and cosmic order that the pharaoh was responsible for maintaining. The massive stone monuments rising along the desert edge stood as visible proof that Ma'at prevailed, that chaos had been pushed back, and that Egypt flourished under divine rule. The stage was now fully set for the innovations that would shortly transform Egyptian architecture forever. The administrative systems were in place. The labor organization was refined. The resources were available. And the religious justification was unquestioned. What was needed was vision. Someone who could imagine a structure unlike anything built before, and the courage to attempt it. That vision would soon arrive in the person of a remarkable architect, serving a pharaoh ready to embrace revolutionary ideas. The sun rises over the desert sands near Memphis, casting long shadows across the necropolis at Saqqara. This sacred burial ground, already ancient by the time our story begins, is about to witness something unprecedented. Here, in the 27th century before the Common Era, a young pharaoh named Djoser has ascended to the throne of the Third Dynasty, and with him comes a vision that will transform Egyptian architecture forever. Djoser inherits a land of prosperity and divine tradition. Like the kings before him, he must prepare for his eternal rest, commissioning a tomb worthy of a god king. Yet Djoser possesses something his predecessors lacked, the counsel of an extraordinary mind. Imhotep, whose name means he who comes in peace, serves as the pharaoh's vizier, high priest, and architect. This remarkable individual will soon prove himself one of history's first recorded geniuses, a man whose innovations ripple through the millennia. For generations, Egyptian rulers have been laid to rest beneath mastabas, rectangular structures with flat roofs and sloping sides. These mud brick monuments sit low against the horizon, solid and respectable, housing the underground chambers where royal remains lie surrounded by provisions for the afterlife. Imhotep studies these traditional tombs with the eye of someone who sees not what is, but what could be. His mind reaches towards something grander, something that reaches toward the heavens themselves. The architect begins with revolutionary materials. While mud brick has served Egypt well, Imhotep envisions working with limestone, carving the earth's bones into permanent form. This is not entirely without precedent. Stone has been used in smaller quantities for temple floors and doorways, but never on the scale that now takes shape in Imhotep's imagination. The quarries of Tura, across the Nile, hold fine white limestone that can be cut into blocks, transported across the sacred river, and assembled into a monument that will outlast the centuries. The design that emerges defies tradition while honoring it. Imhotep conceives of a mastaba, yes, but then something more. Atop the first level, another smaller mastaba will rise, and above that, another still. The structure will ascend in 6 distinct stages, each tier slightly smaller than the one below, creating a stepped appearance that leads the eye upward toward the realm of the gods. This will be a stairway for the pharaoh's spirit, a means to climb from the earth to the sky, to join Ra in his eternal journey across the heavens. The construction site at Saqqara awakens to unprecedented activity. Teams of workers arrive, not slaves as later myths will claim, but skilled laborers and seasonal workers who serve their pharaoh during the inundation when farming becomes impossible. Quarrymen split limestone from the living rock using copper tools and wooden wedges. They have learned that wooden wedges, when soaked with water, expand with tremendous force, splitting even the most stubborn stone along planned lines. The blocks, some weighing as much as several men, must travel from quarry to construction site. Wooden sleds prove effective when pulled across paths moistened with water, the liquid reducing friction and allowing teams to move massive weights. Overseers coordinate the efforts, their voices carrying across the desert as they call out rhythms to keep the workers synchronized. The blocks arrive at Saqqara, and the real artistry begins. Imhotep's design requires precision. Each stone must fit snugly against its neighbors. The limestone blocks, dressed smooth by skilled masons, stack upon one another with careful attention to weight distribution and stability. Unlike the mud brick of earlier structures, stone presents new challenges. It cannot simply be molded and shaped while wet. It must be cut, fitted, and placed with exacting care. The architect's instructions guide every placement, every angle, every measurement. As the first level takes shape, the monument already surpasses any tomb built before. But the workers continue upward, building ramps of mud brick and rubble to reach the higher levels. The second tier rises atop the first, set back to create that distinctive stepped profile. Then the third level and the fourth, each one requiring the same meticulous attention to engineering and construction. The structure grows like a mountain being born from the desert floor, its white limestone gleaming under the relentless Egyptian sun. The pyramid, for that is what we now call this stepped structure, though the Egyptians themselves use different terms, eventually reaches a height of more than 60 meters. It dominates the landscape, visible from great distances, announcing the power and divine nature of the pharaoh who commissioned it. Yet this monument represents far more than simple grandeur. It is a statement in stone of new possibilities, a demonstration that human ingenuity, guided by brilliant vision, can reshape the world itself. Surrounding the pyramid, Imhotep designs an entire complex. A massive rectangular wall of limestone encloses an area of 15 hectares, within which stand chapels, courtyards, and ceremonial buildings. Many of these structures feature columns, but not the simple pillars known from earlier wooden architecture. Imhotep creates engaged columns attached to walls, carved to resemble bundles of reeds and papyrus plants. These stone translations of organic forms bring the vitality of the Nile Valley into permanent architecture, freezing in limestone the shapes of living plants. Some of these buildings within the complex may never be used in a conventional sense. They are models, eternal versions of structures that exist elsewhere in perishable materials. A pharaoh needs palaces and temples in the afterlife, and here Imhotep provides them in everlasting stone. False doors appear in solid walls, portals for the spirit to pass through. Windows open onto solid rock. These are structures for eternity, operating by different rules than those that govern the world of the living. The innovation extends even to details we might overlook. The ceiling blocks in some passages are curved, mimicking the appearance of logs used in earlier wooden architecture. Imhotep and his craftsmen understand that this new material, this stone that will last forever, must still honor the forms and traditions that came before. They are revolutionizing construction while maintaining continuity with the past, a delicate balance that Egyptian culture will maintain for thousands of years. When the complex finally reaches completion after decades of work, it stands as something unprecedented in human history. Djoser's step pyramid is not merely a tomb, but a statement about what civilization can achieve when vision, resources, and skilled labor combine under brilliant leadership. The monument declares that pharaohs are indeed divine, capable of marshalling forces to create works that approach the eternal. Imhotep's reputation grows to legendary status even during his lifetime. Future generations will deify him, worshipping him as a god of wisdom and medicine. His pyramid will inspire imitators, other pharaohs who commission their own stepped pyramids, though none quite match the original in ambition and execution. And beyond these immediate successors, the pyramid concept itself will evolve, leading to developments we shall soon discover, refinements that transform steps into smooth slopes, reaching ever higher toward the heavens. As night falls over Saqqara, the stepped pyramid catches the last rays of the setting sun, its limestone faces glowing golden against the darkening sky. Somewhere within or beneath this mountain of stone, Djoser will eventually take his eternal rest, surrounded by the innovation and ambition that defined his reign. The structure will stand for 46 centuries and counting, weathered but unbroken, a testament to the moment when human architecture reached toward immortality and, in stone at least, achieved it. As Imhotep's revolutionary stepped pyramid stood complete at Saqqara, the techniques and organizational methods it required did not simply vanish into history. They became the foundation for something even more ambitious, more perfectly geometric, more audacious in scale. The lessons learned from building Djoser's monument would be refined and expanded by successive pharaohs, each pushing the boundaries of what seemed possible. Yet none would surpass the sheer magnitude of what Pharaoh Khufu envisioned when he ascended to the throne around 2589 BCE. Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops, was the second pharaoh of the 4th dynasty. His father, Sneferu, had already demonstrated an almost obsessive dedication to pyramid construction, building 3 large pyramids during his reign and perfecting the transition from stepped sides to smooth, angled faces. But Khufu looked toward the plateau at Giza, a limestone outcrop on the west bank of the Nile, just south of where the river's branches spread into the delta, and saw the perfect canvas for a monument that would eclipse all others. The Great Pyramid, as it would come to be known, stands as the oldest of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and the only one still largely intact. Its statistics alone inspire awe. The base originally covered approximately 13 acres, with each side measuring about 755 feet in length. The pyramid rose to a height of 481 feet, making it the tallest human-made structure in the world for nearly 4,000 years. To create this monument, workers would quarry, transport, and precisely position an estimated 2.3 million limestone blocks, each weighing on average about 2.5 tons, though some of the granite blocks in the internal chambers weighed as much as 80 tons. The first challenge was selecting and preparing the site itself. The Giza Plateau offered solid bedrock capable of supporting such tremendous weight, but it required careful leveling. The ancient engineers achieved a remarkably flat base, with the variation across the entire 13-acre foundation measuring less than an inch. They likely accomplished this through a method involving water-filled trenches cut into the bedrock, allowing them to establish a consistent horizontal reference point across the entire area. The orientation of the pyramid demonstrates equally impressive precision. Its 4 sides align almost perfectly with the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west, with an error of only about 3/60ths of a single degree. Ancient astronomers likely achieved this alignment through careful observation of the stars, possibly using a technique involving tracking the circular path of stars around the celestial pole and finding the center point of that arc. The limestone for the pyramid's core came from quarries immediately nearby on the Giza Plateau itself. Workers used copper chisels and harder stone hammers to cut channels around the blocks they wished to extract, then drove wooden wedges into the channels. When wetted, the wedges expanded, splitting the limestone free along natural bedding planes in the rock. This same process repeated thousands upon thousands of times as teams of quarrymen worked in rotating shifts, the sound of copper against stone ringing across the plateau day after day. The finer white limestone that formed the pyramid's original smooth outer casing came from quarries at Tura, across the Nile on the eastern bank. This higher quality limestone could be polished to a brilliant shine that would have made the completed pyramid gleam in the Egyptian sun, visible for miles across the desert. Barges transported these casing stones across the river during the annual inundation, when the Nile's waters rose high enough to bring boats close to the construction site. The massive granite blocks used in the king's chamber and the relieving chambers above it travelled even farther, from quarries near Aswan, some 500 miles to the south. These enormous stones made the journey downriver on large wooden barges, taking advantage of the Nile's current, though the return journey for the empty barges would have required either rowing or waiting for favourable winds. Once the stones arrived at Giza, the monumental task of moving them into position began. For generations, people imagined vast armies of slaves dragging blocks up external ramps under the whip, a dramatic image that persisted in popular imagination and even in certain ancient accounts written long after the pyramids were built. Modern understanding tells a different story, one of organized workers, specialized teams, and impressive logistical coordination. Evidence from workers' villages, bakeries, and breweries near the Giza site suggests a workforce of several thousand people at any given time, with estimates ranging from around 10,000 to perhaps 20,000 during peak construction periods. These were not enslaved people but Egyptian citizens fulfilling their labor obligation to the pharaoh, a system called corvée labor. Many were farmers who worked on the pyramid during the inundation season, when their fields lay underwater and agricultural work was impossible. They received food, shelter, and beer rations, and they participated in building what they understood as the pharaoh's eternal resting place, a sacred duty that helped maintain cosmic order. The workforce organized into crews with names that have survived in quarry marks and graffiti found on the stones themselves. These crews bore names like Friends of Khufu or Drunkards of Menkore, suggesting both pride in their work and a sense of camaraderie. Each crew, subdivided into smaller teams responsible for specific tasks, creating an efficient organizational structure that could coordinate the movement of millions of tons of stone. The method of raising the blocks remains a subject of scholarly discussion, as no ancient accounts describe the process in detail. The most widely accepted theory involves the use of ramps, though the exact configuration of these ramps is debated. A single straight ramp reaching to the pyramid's top would have required more material than the pyramid itself. More likely, the builders used a combination of approaches, perhaps a switchback ramp spiraling around the outside, or internal ramps within the structure, or a combination of methods that evolved as the pyramid grew taller. Workers moved the blocks themselves using wooden sledges, pulled over tracks that crews wetted with water. Recent experiments have demonstrated that wetting the sand in front of a sledge reduces friction significantly, making it much easier to drag heavy loads. Dozens of men pulling together on ropes attached to each sledge would have moved the blocks forward, their movements coordinated by work songs whose rhythms are lost to time but whose purpose we can still imagine. Inside the pyramid, a complex system of passages and chambers took shape. The entrance, located on the north face, led to a descending passage that initially headed down into the bedrock beneath the pyramid. An ascending passage branched off, leading upward to the grand gallery, a corbelled passage with a ceiling nearly 30 feet high, built with such precision that the joints between stones remain nearly invisible. The Grand Gallery, in turn, led to the king's chamber, constructed entirely of red granite blocks and containing a lidless sarcophagus carved from a single block of granite. The king's chamber features 5 relieving chambers above it, spaces designed to distribute the enormous weight of the stone above away from the chamber's ceiling. The builder's engineering intuition proved sound. After more than 4,500 years, the ceiling remains intact despite the tremendous load it bears. The construction of the Great Pyramid occupied much of Khufu's 23-year reign. As the monument rose layer by layer, it became not just a tomb, but a statement about the pharaoh's power, the capabilities of Egyptian civilization, and the devotion of the people to their divine king. The completed pyramid, with its brilliant white casing stones and its gilded capstone catching the first and last light of each day, stood as an artificial mountain, a stairway to the heavens, a permanent marker of humanity's ability to reshape the world through coordinated effort and engineering vision. Around the Great Pyramid, a complex of smaller structures took shape. 3 smaller pyramids housed queens and family members. Boat pits contained dismantled cedar boats that would allow the pharaoh to travel in the afterlife. A mortuary temple on the pyramid's east side connected via a long causeway to a valley temple where rituals would be performed. An entire city of the dead surrounded the monument, with mastaba tombs for nobles and officials arranged near orderly streets, all oriented toward their king's eternal dwelling. The Great Pyramid of Khufu represents the zenith of pyramid construction, the moment when ambition, resources, engineering knowledge, and organizational capability all align to create something that would outlast empires and civilizations, yet unborn when its capstone was set in place. The Great Pyramids rise above the desert sands like mountains crafted by human hands, yet their magnificence tells only part of the story of ancient Egypt. Beyond these monuments to divine kingship, beyond the gleaming white limestone that caught the sun's rays and announced the pharaoh's glory to all who beheld them, existed another world entirely. This was the world of ordinary Egyptians, the farmers and fishermen, the craftspeople and servants who formed the living foundation upon which the entire civilization rested. Let us journey now from the plateau of Giza down to the fertile banks of the Nile, where most Egyptians spent their days in pursuits far removed from the construction of eternal monuments. Here, along the river's edge, life unfolded according to rhythms established not by royal decree, but by the annual cycle of the great river itself. This was a rhythm as old as Egypt, as predictable as the stars, and as essential to survival as breath itself. The villages that dotted the Nile Valley were modest affairs compared to the splendor of the pyramids. Houses were built primarily from mud bricks, formed from the very soil of Egypt, mixed with water and straw, then left to bake hard under the relentless sun. These bricks provided surprisingly effective insulation, keeping homes cool during the scorching days and retaining warmth during the cooler nights. The houses themselves were simple structures, typically consisting of just a few rooms arranged around a central living area. Roofs were flat, constructed from wooden beams covered with palm leaves and mud, creating an additional living space where families often slept during the hottest months. seeking whatever evening breeze might offer relief. Inside these humble dwellings, furnishings remained sparse by modern standards. Wealthy families might possess wooden chairs and beds, sometimes decorated with carved legs resembling those of animals. But most Egyptians made do with simple stools, floor mats woven from reeds, and perhaps a few storage chests for their possessions. Windows were small and positioned high on the walls, designed to allow air circulation while keeping out the intense midday sun. The floors were typically packed earth, sometimes covered with woven mats that added a touch of comfort underfoot. The rhythm of daily life was dictated above all by the Nile and its three distinct seasons. The first season, known as Akhet or inundation, lasted from July through October. During these months, the river swelled with waters from distant rains in the Ethiopian highlands, spreading across the floodplain and depositing rich, dark silt that renewed the soil's fertility year after year. This was a time when fieldwork became impossible, when farmers waited and watched the waters rise, and when many able-bodied men might be called upon to work on royal building projects. As the flood waters receded, the season of Pere or emergence began, lasting from November through February. This was the growing season, when farmers waded into the muddy fields to plant their crops. They scattered seeds of emmer wheat and barley across the damp earth, sometimes using herds of sheep or goats to trample the seeds into the soil. Throughout these months, the fields required constant attention. Farmers dug channels and built small mud walls to direct water from the river to their crops, working their shadaf devices, simple but ingenious mechanisms consisting of a long pole balanced on a frame with a bucket on one end and a counterweight on the other, allowing a single person to lift water with surprising efficiency. The final season, Shemu or harvest, arrived in March and lasted through June. This was the busiest time of year, when entire families moved through the fields, cutting grain with wooden sickles fitted with flint blades. The cut stalks were bound into sheaves and transported to threshing floors, where oxen trampled them to separate grain from chaff. Women and children then tossed the mixture into the air with wooden winnowing fans, allowing the breeze to carry away the lighter chaff, while the heavier grain fell back to the ground. Throughout this process, royal scribes moved among the fields with their papyrus rolls and writing implements, carefully recording the harvest yields to calculate the taxes owed to the pharaoh's treasury. The bounty of the Nile extended beyond cultivated fields. The river itself teemed with fish, providing protein for every social class. Fishermen ventured out in small boats made from bundled papyrus reeds, so lightweight that a single man could carry one on his shoulder. They used nets woven from flax fibers, hooks carved from bone, and long spears to harvest the river's abundance. The marshes along the riverbanks offered additional resources. Papyrus for making everything from boats to writing material. Lotus flowers valued for their beauty and fragrance. An abundant waterfowl that could be caught with throwing sticks or nets. The diet of ordinary Egyptians was simple but nourishing. Bread formed the foundation of most meals, baked in various forms from the wheat and barley that grew so abundantly in Egyptian fields. Beer, thick and nutritious, was consumed by everyone, including children, as it was safer than drinking water from the river and provided valuable calories for people engaged in physical labor. Vegetables supplemented the grain-based diet. Onions, garlic, lentils, chickpeas, lettuce, and cucumbers all grew well in Egyptian soil. Fruits included dates, figs, and grapes. Wealthier families enjoyed meat more regularly, particularly beef, goat, and duck, while poorer families might taste meat only during festivals or special occasions. Women ground grain into flour using stone hand mills, a task that consumed hours each day and left its mark on Egyptian bodies. The flour often contained tiny particles of stone from the grinding process, which gradually wore down people's teeth as they aged. Bread was baked in clay ovens or over open fires, while other foods were boiled in ceramic pots or roasted. Honey served as the primary sweetener, collected from wild bees or from simple hives that some households maintained. Clothing in ancient Egypt was designed for comfort in a hot climate. Men typically wore simple linen kilts, while women dressed in long, straight sheaths that fell from just below the breast to the ankles. Linen was the fabric of choice, woven from fat that grew along the Nile's banks. The finest linen was so sheer as to be nearly transparent, a luxury reserved for the wealthy, while coarser weaves served working people. Children often went naked during the warm months, a practical choice given how quickly they outgrew their garments. Most people went barefoot, though sandals woven from papyrus or palm leaves could be worn for special occasions or protection on hot sand. As the sun set over the Nile each evening, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson, families gathered in their homes or on their rooftops. Oil lamps filled with vegetable oil and fitted with twisted linen wicks provided modest illumination. Parents told stories to their children. Craftspeople prepared for the next day's work, and the sounds of daily life gradually gave way to the quiet of the Egyptian night. The same stars that shone down on the pyramids illuminated these simple villages, connecting the mighty and the humble under the same vast sky. All of them children of the Nile. All of them part of the great story of Egypt unfolding season after season, generation after generation, along the banks of the eternal river. As the sun rose over the Nile each morning, casting golden light across the river's surface, the homes of ancient Egypt would stir to life with the sounds of families beginning their day. The Egyptian household, whether humble or grand, was the foundation upon which this great civilization was built, and within its walls unfolded the intimate stories of love, partnership, and the raising of children. Marriage in ancient Egypt was primarily a practical arrangement, though this does not mean it lacked affection. When a young man reached the age of readiness, typically in his late teens or early 20s, he would seek a bride, often a girl of 12 to 15 years. The union required no elaborate ceremony in a temple, no intervention from priests or state officials. Instead, marriage began when a woman moved her belongings into the home of her husband, a simple act that transformed two individuals into a recognized partnership. The Egyptians had a wonderfully direct phrase for this: to found a house. What made Egyptian marriage remarkable for its time was the respect accorded to women within these unions. Unlike many ancient societies, Egyptian wives were not considered property. They could own land in their own names, conduct business independently, and even initiate divorce if the marriage proved unbearable. A husband might present his wife with a marriage settlement, a form of financial security that would support her should the union dissolve. These arrangements were recorded by scribes on papyrus, ensuring legal protection for both parties. Within the home, husband and wife occupied distinct but complementary spheres. The man typically engaged in work outside the household, whether tilling the fields, practicing a craft, or serving in an administrative capacity. The woman managed the household's internal affairs, a responsibility that carried genuine authority. She supervised the grinding of grain, the baking of bread, the brewing of beer, and the production of linen cloth from flax. In wealthier households, she directed servants in these tasks. In poorer families, she performed the labor herself, often with her daughters at her side, learning the skills they would one day use in their own homes. The decoration of tomb walls and the contents of burial chambers reveal much about how Egyptians viewed the marital bond. Husbands and wives are frequently depicted side by side, of equal stature, sometimes with the wife's arm affectionately draped around her husband's shoulders. These images suggest partnerships built on mutual regard, where companionship mattered as much as duty. Children were the treasured hope of every Egyptian family. In a world where infant mortality remained heartbreakingly common, the successful rearing of children to adulthood was seen as a great blessing. Expectant mothers wore amulets of protective deities and recited prayers to Taweret, the hippopotamus goddess who watched over childbirth. When a child arrived safely into the world, there was genuine celebration throughout the household. Infants spent their earliest days cradled close to their mothers, nursed frequently and kept nearby as the woman continued her daily tasks. Mothers in ancient Egypt typically nursed their children for 3 years, a practice that provided not only nutrition, but also a natural spacing between births. Small children wore no clothing in Egypt's warm climate, and artistic depictions show them with a distinctive side lock of hair, a youth mark here that would be cut when they reached maturity. As children grew, their days filled with both play and learning. Archaeological excavations have uncovered the toys of ancient Egyptian children, revealing a world of imagination that would be familiar to youngsters today. Children played with balls made of leather or papyrus reeds stitched together and stuffed. They cherished dolls crafted from wood or clay, some with movable arms and real hair. Toy animals carved from wood or molded from clay populated their games. Some inventive artisans even created mechanical toys, including a wooden mouse with a string tail that could be pulled along, and carved crocodiles with jaws that opened and closed. Games of skill tested growing coordination. Children played leapfrog in the dusty streets and competed in tug-of-war contests. They spun tops and rolled hoops with sticks. Board games captivated older children and adults alike, with Senet being particularly beloved. This game, played on a grid with pieces moved according to the throw of sticks or knucklebones, has been found in tombs from the earliest dynasties through to the latest periods of Egyptian civilization. For most children, formal education remained out of reach. The sons of farmers learned farming from their fathers, walking beside them to the fields and gradually assuming more responsibility as their strength increased. The daughters of craftsmen's wives learned household management from their mothers, mastering the endless cycle of tasks that kept a family fed and clothed. But for a fortunate few boys, usually from families of means or those showing exceptional promise, a different path opened, the path to becoming a scribe. The scribe schools, often attached to temples or government offices, offered rigorous training that began when boys were quite young, sometimes as early as 5 or 6 years old. The work was demanding, requiring patience, precision, and an excellent memory. Students learned to prepare their writing surfaces, to mix their inks from carbon black and red ochre, and to cut and maintain their reed brushes. But most importantly, they had to master the hundreds of hieroglyphic symbols that form the written language of Egypt. Training proceeded through the copying of standard texts, with teachers quick to correct errors. Students wrote on pieces of broken pottery or flakes of limestone, materials abundant and free, saving expensive papyrus for later stages of training. The maxims they copied often praised the scribal profession and reminded students of the rewards awaiting those who persevered. One such text proclaimed that a scribe's writings would ensure his name lived forever, longer than any monument of stone. Within families, the generations were bound by bonds of obligation and affection. Children were expected to honor their parents, to care for them in old age, and to ensure their proper burial and remembrance after death. The wisdom literature of ancient Egypt, passed from father to son, emphasized the importance of listening to one's parents, of learning from their experience, and of maintaining the family's good name through proper behavior. Yet these relationships were not merely dutiful. The personal letters that have survived on papyrus scraps reveal genuine warmth between family members. A son away from home might write to his mother expressing longing to see her. A husband traveling for work might send affectionate greetings to his wife and children. These fragmentary messages, preserved by Egypt's dry climate, offer glimpses into the private emotions of people who lived thousands of years ago, reminding us that the love within families transcends the centuries. As evening fell over the Egyptian household, and the family gathered for their meal of bread, vegetables, and perhaps fish from the Nile, they embodied patterns of life that had sustained their civilization through generations. The lessons taught, the skills passed down, the values instilled within the home, these were the threads that wove the fabric of Egyptian society, as essential to its endurance as any pyramid rising against the desert sky. The morning sun rises over the Nile, casting golden light across the village, where a young boy named Amenhotep awakens with particular excitement. Today marks his first day of formal training to become a scribe, a position his family has worked tirelessly to secure for him. As he eats his simple breakfast of bread and beer, his father reminds him of the extraordinary opportunity before him. In a land where most people work with their hands in fields or workshops, the scribe works with the most powerful tool of all, writing. The Egyptian system of writing emerged gradually over centuries, beginning with simple pictorial marks used to record quantities of grain, cattle, and other goods. These early symbols, scratched onto pottery and carved into ivory labels, served purely practical purposes in the growing complexity of Egyptian administration. But as the needs of the state expanded, so too did the writing system. developing into the elaborate script we know as hieroglyphics, a word that comes from the Greek meaning sacred carvings. By the time of the Old Kingdom, Egyptian writing had evolved into a sophisticated system containing hundreds of distinct signs. Some hieroglyphs represented complete words or ideas, like a simple picture of the sun meaning sun or day. Others functioned as phonetic symbols, representing sounds that could be combined to spell out words, much like our alphabet today. Still others served as determinatives, silent signs placed at the end of words to clarify their meaning. This combination of different types of symbols created a flexible and nuanced writing system capable of expressing complex thoughts, recording historical events, and preserving religious texts for eternity. Young Amenhotep arrives at the scribal school attached to the local temple, joining a dozen other boys seated cross-legged on the floor. The instructor, an elderly scribe whose fingers are permanently stained with ink, surveys his new students with an expression both stern and knowing. The path to becoming a scribe requires years of dedicated study, beginning with endless copying of basic signs. There are no shortcuts, no easy paths to literacy in ancient Egypt. The students receive their writing equipment, a palette of wood or stone with two shallow depressions to hold cakes of black and red ink, a leather bag to carry water, and a bundle of reed brushes. The black ink, made from soot or charcoal, mixed with water and plant gum, serves for regular text. The red ink, derived from ochre, marks the beginning of new sections or emphasizes important passages. The writing surface is papyrus, that remarkable material made from the pith of papyrus plants that grow abundantly in the marshes of the delta. To create papyrus, craftsmen cut the triangular stems of the plant and slice the white pith inside into thin strips. These strips are laid side by side vertically, then covered with another layer placed horizontally. When pressed and dried, the plant's natural starches bind the layers together, creating a smooth, pale surface ideal for writing. The finished sheets can be joined edge to edge to create long scrolls, some extending many feet in length. This Egyptian innovation provides a writing material far superior to clay tablets or animal skins, light enough to transport easily, yet durable enough to preserve texts for thousands of years. The students begin their lessons by practicing individual hieroglyphic signs, dipping their reed brushes into water, then rubbing them on the cake of black ink to create the proper consistency. The instructor demonstrates the correct way to hold the brush, the proper stroke order for complex signs, and the importance of maintaining consistent proportions. Egyptian aesthetic principles demand that writing be beautiful as well as functional. Hieroglyphs carved on temple walls or painted on tomb chambers must be executed with artistic precision, their balanced forms contributing to the overall harmony of the composition. As the morning progresses, Amenhotep's hand grows tired from the unfamiliar position, and his early attempts at copying appear clumsy compared to the elegant examples before him. Yet he persists, understanding that every accomplished scribe in Egypt began exactly as he has, struggling to master these sacred signs. The instructor moves among the students, occasionally correcting a grip or demonstrating a stroke, but mostly allowing repetition to develop skill. The life of a scribe offers possibilities unimaginable for those without literacy. Scribes serve in temples, recording offerings and managing estates. They work in government offices, calculating taxes and organizing labor for building projects. They accompany military expeditions to document campaigns and record tribute from conquered territories. They serve in the houses of nobles, managing household accounts and writing letters on behalf of their employers. Some scribes specialize in particular types of texts, becoming experts in medical knowledge, mathematical calculations, or religious literature. Scribes occupy a respected position in society, exempt from the manual labor required of farmers and craftsmen. Their clean white kilts remain unstained by mud or stone dust. Their hands, though ink darkened, never callous from wielding hoes or hauling blocks. An ancient text extolling the scribal profession declares, "Put writing in your heart that you may protect yourself from hard labor of any kind. The scribe is released from manual tasks. It is he who commands." Yet the path to this privileged position demands years of discipline. Beyond learning the hundreds of hieroglyphic signs, students must master hieratic script, a cursive form of writing used for everyday documents, where hieroglyphs can be written in rows or columns, reading either left to right or right to left depending on which direction the signs face. Hieratic flows primarily from right to left in horizontal lines, its simplified forms allowing for faster writing on papyrus. Students memorize model letters, copy classical texts, and practice the standard formulas used in different types of documents. They study mathematics, learning to calculate areas, volumes and quantities necessary for managing grain stores or planning construction projects. They familiarize themselves with the administrative vocabulary essential for bureaucratic work. The training extends beyond mere technical skill to encompass proper behavior, refined speech, and the cultivated manner expected of those who serve in positions of authority. As the sun climbs higher and the temple courtyard grows warm, the instructor finally signals the end of the morning session. Amenhotep carefully cleans his brushes and returns his equipment to its proper place, already thinking about the practice he will need to complete before tomorrow's lesson. Around him, the vast machinery of Egyptian civilization hums with activity, all of it dependent on the written word. Tax records document the harvests from countless fields. Work rosters organize labor gangs. Temple inventories track offerings to the gods. Royal decrees carry the pharaoh's commands to distant provinces. Letters maintain connections across the length of the Nile. Walking home through the village, Amenhotep passes a stone monument inscribed with hieroglyphs celebrating a local official's achievement. The signs, carved with masterful precision, will preserve this man's name and deeds long after his body has returned to dust. This is the true power of writing, the ability to transcend the limitations of human memory and speak across generations. The hieroglyphs adorning temple walls, tomb chambers, and monuments throughout Egypt serve not merely as decoration, but as a bridge between the present and eternity, ensuring that knowledge, history, and identity persist beyond the fleeting span of individual lives. The darkness that descended upon Egypt after the Old Kingdom's collapse was not eternal, like the sun that disappeared each night, only to rise again each morning. Egypt would find its way back to glory. The period historians call the First Intermediate Period had seen the unified land fragment into competing regions, with local rulers claiming authority over their own territories. The Great Pyramids still stood at Giza, silent witnesses to a grandeur that seemed impossibly distant, while the power that had built them scattered like seeds on the desert wind. Yet from this fragmentation, something remarkable was stirring. In the southern city of Thebes, a line of rulers was growing in strength and ambition. These princes of Upper Egypt, beginning with the 11th dynasty, would gradually extend their influence northward, reclaiming the scattered pieces of Egyptian civilization. Around 2055 BCE, a ruler named Mentuhotep II succeeded in what must have seemed an almost mythical achievement to his contemporaries. He reunited the two lands, bringing Upper and Lower Egypt back under a single crown after more than a century of division. The reunification was not merely a political achievement. It marked the beginning of what we now call the Middle Kingdom, an era that would see Egypt rediscover its creative spirit and cultural confidence. Mentuhotep II established his capital at Thebes, far to the south of the old administrative center at Memphis. This choice would have profound implications for Egyptian religion and culture, as Thebes brought with it the worship of Amun, a deity who would gradually rise to become one of Egypt's most important gods. The pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom approached their role differently than their Old Kingdom predecessors, where the builders of the Great Pyramids had presented themselves as distant, godlike figures whose authority was absolute and unquestioned. The Middle Kingdom rulers styled themselves as shepherds of their people. In their texts and inscriptions, they emphasized their responsibility to care for all Egyptians, to ensure justice, and to protect the vulnerable. This was not weakness, but rather a different understanding of what it meant to rule. Mentuhotep II's most visible legacy was his mortuary complex at Deir el-Bahri, nestled against the towering cliffs on the western bank of the Nile near Thebes. This structure departed dramatically from the pyramid tradition. Instead of a solitary geometric mountain rising from the desert, Mentuhotep's monument integrated itself into the natural landscape, with terraced courtyards and colonnaded halls leading back into the cliff face. It was a building that worked with the land rather than dominating it, and it would inspire later architects, including those who would build for the female pharaoh Hatshepsut centuries later. The 12th dynasty, which followed the 11th around 1985 BCE, brought even greater stability and prosperity. These rulers, beginning with Amenemhat I, moved the capital back north to a new city called Ichtawi, located near the Fayum region. Though this city has never been precisely located by archaeologists, ancient texts tell us it served as an effective administrative center, positioned between Upper and Lower Egypt, symbolizing the careful balance these pharaohs maintained. The 12th dynasty pharaohs were builders, but their constructions reflected different priorities than the Old Kingdom pyramid builders. They continued to build pyramids for their own burials, though these were smaller and constructed with mud brick cores rather than solid stone. What they invested their resources in instead was infrastructure. They undertook massive irrigation projects in the Fayum, transforming marshland into productive agricultural territory. They constructed fortresses along the southern border in Nubia, impressive stone strongholds that protected trade routes and asserted Egyptian authority. Trade flourished during the Middle Kingdom as never before. Egyptian expeditions traveled to the land of Punt on the Red Sea coast, returning with precious incense, ebony, and exotic animals. Merchants sailed to Byblos on the Mediterranean coast, trading for the cedar wood that Egypt lacked. Turquoise and copper came from mines in the Sinai Peninsula, while gold flowed from Nubian territories to the south. This expanded commercial network brought wealth, but also new ideas and influences that enriched Egyptian culture. The art of the Middle Kingdom developed its own distinctive character. Sculptors created works that moved away from the idealized, serene faces of Old Kingdom statuary. Instead, portraits of Middle Kingdom pharaohs often showed careworn features, lined faces that suggested the weight of responsibility and experience. These were not expressions of despair, but rather of mature wisdom, reflecting the self-image of rulers who saw themselves as devoted servants of their land. The artistic conventions remained Egyptian in their essence, yet something had shifted, becoming more introspective and psychologically complex. Literature flourished during this period in ways that have given us some of ancient Egypt's most celebrated texts. Scribes composed wisdom literature, collections of advice and philosophical reflection on how to live a good life and serve effectively in administration. Tales of adventure and misfortune entertained while conveying moral lessons. The Tale of Sinuhe, which recounts an official's flight from Egypt and eventual return, became one of the most copied and beloved stories of ancient Egyptian literature. These texts reveal a society deeply concerned with questions of justice, proper behavior, and the relationship between individual and community. Religious thought evolved as well during the Middle Kingdom. The concept of the afterlife, once largely reserved for royalty, became increasingly democratized. Non-royal individuals began including in their tombs texts and spells that had previously been the exclusive preserve of pharaohs. The idea took hold that all people, if they lived justly, and if proper funeral rites were performed, might hope for a blessed afterlife. This represented a profound shift in how Egyptians understood their cosmos and their place within it. The Middle Kingdom pharaohs also left their mark through expeditions into Nubia to the south. Rather than simply raiding for resources, they established permanent Egyptian presence through a series of massive fortresses. These military installations, built with sophisticated defensive features, protected trade routes and mining operations while projecting Egyptian power. Some of these fortresses, preserved for millennia in the dry climate, give us remarkable insight into Middle Kingdom military architecture. As the 12th dynasty progressed through its succession of capable rulers, Egypt enjoyed a stability that would be remembered as a golden age. Amenemhat III, one of the dynasty's longest reigning pharaohs, completed the Fayum irrigation works and left behind colossal statues that speak to the confidence and resources of his reign. The administration functioned with efficiency. Taxes were collected, justice was dispensed, and the boundaries of Egypt remained secure. Yet even golden ages must eventually end. The 13th dynasty that followed saw shorter reigns and a gradual weakening of central authority. The reasons remained debated, but the result was clear. Egypt was entering another period of uncertainty, one that would eventually see foreign rulers establish themselves in the Delta region. But that belongs to another chapter of our story. For now, as we rest beside the Nile in these prosperous years of the Middle Kingdom, we can imagine the satisfaction of a civilization that had reunited itself, rediscovered its purpose, and was once again flourishing along the life-giving river that made all things possible. The Middle Kingdom had brought renewal to Egypt, strengthening the bonds between the land and its people. Yet beneath all the political changes, the military campaigns and the architectural achievements, there flowed something deeper and more constant than even the Nile itself. This was the spiritual current that connected every Egyptian, from the pharaoh in his palace to the farmer in his field, to forces greater than themselves. The gods of Egypt were everywhere, woven into the very fabric of existence, as essential to daily life as bread and water. Imagine standing on the banks of the Nile as dawn breaks across the eastern horizon. The ancient Egyptians watching this same sight did not simply see the sun rising. They witnessed the daily rebirth of Ra, the sun god, emerging from the underworld where he had battled darkness through the night. Ra sailed across the sky in his solar bark, a divine boat that carried him from east to west, bringing light and warmth to the world below. This was not mere poetry to the Egyptians. It was observable truth, a divine drama that played out above them every single day. Ra was often depicted with the head of a falcon, crowned by a blazing solar disk encircled by a cobra. As the supreme solar deity, he represented order, justice, and the power that sustained all life. But Ra was not static. The Egyptians understood that the sun changed its nature throughout the day. At dawn, he might be called Khepri, shown as a scarab beetle rolling the sun disk across the sky, just as actual beetles rolled balls of dung across the sand. By evening, he became Atum, the setting sun that descended into the realm of night. The Nile itself, so central to Egyptian survival, had its own deity in Hapi. This god of the annual flood was depicted as a man with a large belly and full breasts, symbolizing the nourishing abundance the inundation brought. Hapi was neither entirely male nor female, embodying instead the fertility and sustenance that transcended such categories. When the floodwaters rose each year at precisely the right time, bringing their gift of rich black soil, the Egyptians saw the benevolence of Hapi at work. In the realm of death and rebirth dwelt Osiris, perhaps the god most intimately connected to Egyptian hopes for eternal life. According to ancient tradition, Osiris had once ruled Egypt as a just and beloved king who taught humans agriculture and civilization. His jealous brother Seth murdered him and scattered his body across Egypt. But Isis, the devoted wife of Osiris and one of the most powerful goddesses in the Egyptian pantheon, searched tirelessly until she found every piece. With her sister Nephthys and the jackal-headed god Anubis, Isis reassembled Osiris and restored him to life, though not to the world of the living. Instead, Osiris became the ruler of the afterlife, the judge who would weigh the hearts of the deceased against the feather of truth. The story of Osiris gave every Egyptian hope. If a god could die and be reborn, if scattered pieces could be made whole again, then death was not an ending, but a transformation. Osiris was typically shown as a mummified figure with green or black skin, colors representing both the fertile soil of the Nile and the regeneration that followed death. He held the crook and flail, symbols of kingship, for he was the pharaoh of eternity. Isis herself commanded immense devotion throughout Egyptian history. She was the ideal mother, the loyal wife, the powerful magician who knew secret names and wielded great magic. Common people prayed to her for protection, for healing, for help in daily struggles. She wore a throne-shaped crown, her very name written with the hieroglyph for throne, connecting her intrinsically to royal power. Yet, she remained accessible, a goddess who understood suffering because she had experienced it herself. Her son Horus, conceived miraculously after Osiris's death, became the divine prototype for every living pharaoh. Shown as a falcon or a man with a falcon's head, Horus represented kingship, the sky, and divine order. When he grew to manhood, Horus challenged Seth for his rightful inheritance, the throne of Egypt. The conflict between Horus and Seth was understood as the eternal struggle between order and chaos, between the fertile Nile Valley and the barren desert, between life and destruction. Every pharaoh was considered the living embodiment of Horus, and upon death became one with Osiris. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and the moon, held a special place as the divine scribe who recorded everything. He was the inventor of hieroglyphics, the measurer of time, and the mediator who often resolved disputes among the gods. In the judgment hall of the dead, Thoth stood by the scales recording the verdict as each heart was weighed. Scholars and scribes considered him their patron, the source of all knowledge and learning. The cat-headed goddess Bastard embodied protection, joy, and the warmth of the sun. Originally depicted as a fierce lioness, over time she became associated with the domestic cat, those graceful creatures that protected Egyptian granaries from mice and rats. Festivals in her honor at the city of Bubastis drew enormous crowds who came to celebrate with music, dancing, and revelry. Hathor, often shown as a cow or a woman with cow's ears, was the goddess of love, beauty, music, and motherhood. She was called the Golden One, associated with joy and celebration. Yet she too had a fierce aspect, for the Egyptians understood that divine forces were complex, containing multitudes. The same goddess who brought love could, when angered, become the destructive Sekhmet, the lioness who nearly destroyed humanity before being tricked into drinking beer dyed red like blood until she became too intoxicated to continue her rampage. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, presided over mummification and guided souls through the dangerous journey to the afterlife. His black color represented both the black soil of Egypt and the color of mummified flesh. Priests performing mummification rituals wore Anubis masks, becoming the gods' earthly representatives as they prepared bodies for eternity. These deities were not distant abstractions, but active presences in Egyptian life. People wore amulets shaped like sacred symbols or divine forms. They named their children after gods, hoping to secure divine favor. They whispered prayers at household shrines and brought offerings to local temples, The gods explained everything, from why the sun rose each morning, to why crops flourished or failed, from the gift of the Nile's flood, to the mystery of what happened after death. The relationships between gods mirrored human relationships while transcending them. They formed families. They argued and reconciled. They held court and made judgments. Yet they also represented fundamental forces and principles. Ma'at, often shown as a woman with an ostrich feather on her head, was both a goddess and the concept of truth, justice, harmony, and balance that held the universe together. Every pharaoh swore to uphold Ma'at, to maintain cosmic order against the constant threat of chaos. As night settles over our journey through ancient Egypt, picture the temples lighting their lamps, the gods dwelling in their sanctuaries, the people sleeping under the protection of divine forces they trusted, as surely as they trusted the Nile to flood and the sun to rise. Tomorrow, we will step inside those temples and discover how the priests maintained the daily rituals that kept the gods content and the cosmos in balance. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty paths leading to the great temple complexes that dotted the Egyptian landscape. These magnificent structures stood as more than places of worship. They were the beating heart of Egyptian civilization, where the earthly realm touched the divine, where priests performed ancient rituals that had been passed down through countless generations, and where the very balance of the cosmos was maintained through careful ceremony and devotion. The temples themselves were architectural marvels, designed according to principles that reflected the Egyptian understanding of the universe. A visitor approaching one of these sacred precincts would first encounter massive stone walls that enclosed the entire complex, separating the sacred space from the ordinary world beyond. These walls might stretch for hundreds of yards, creating a rectangular boundary that protected and defined the holy ground within. Passing through the monumental gateway, known as a pylon, one entered the temple grounds proper. These pylons were themselves impressive structures, consisting of two massive trapezoidal towers flanking the entrance, their sloping walls decorated with carved reliefs showing the pharaoh defeating Egypt's enemies and making offerings to the gods. The message was clear. The temple was a place of divine order, protected from the chaos that threatened beyond its walls. Beyond the pylon lay an open courtyard, often surrounded by columns on three sides. This was the only part of the temple complex where ordinary Egyptians might gather during festivals, when the god's statue would be brought forth in procession. The rest of the year, however, even this courtyard remained largely empty, the domain of priests moving quietly about their sacred duties. Moving deeper into the temple, one would pass through another pylon into the hypostyle hall, a forest of massive columns that supported a stone roof. Here, the light grew dimmer, filtering through small windows set high in the walls. The columns themselves were carved and painted to resemble papyrus plants or lotus flowers, transforming the hall into a symbolic representation of the primordial marsh from which the Egyptians believed creation had emerged. Walking through these stone thickets, with their painted colors still bright in the filtered light, visitors experienced a sense of moving backward through time, approaching the very moment of creation itself. Still deeper lay the inner sanctuaries, rooms that grew progressively smaller, darker, and more restricted. The floor level gradually rose while the ceiling lowered, creating a sense of compression and intimacy. Only the highest-ranking priests could enter these innermost chambers, where the statue of the god resided in darkness, housed within a stone shrine. The daily ritual followed a pattern that varied little across the centuries. Before dawn, a high priest, having bathed and purified himself, would approach the sealed shrine. He carried a small oil lamp, its flickering light the only illumination in the dark sanctuary. Breaking the clay seal that had secured the shrine's doors since the previous day, he would open them to reveal the god's statue within. The priest would then perform what Egyptians called the opening of the mouth ritual, using sacred implements to symbolically awaken the statue and restore its divine essence. He would anoint the statue with precious oils, dress it in fresh linen garments, and adorn it with jewelry. Incense would be burned, filling the chamber with fragrant smoke. Finally, offerings of food and drink would be presented. Fresh bread, roasted meat, beer, wine, and water drawn from the sacred lake within the temple complex. These offerings were not merely symbolic. The Egyptians believed that the god's Ka, its vital essence, consumed the spiritual substance of the food, after which the physical offerings would be distributed to the priests themselves. In this way, the temple priests lived quite literally off the gods they served, receiving portions of meat, bread, and beer that had been sanctified by divine contact. Throughout the day, additional rituals might be performed. At midday and again at sunset, further offerings would be made, accompanied by prayers and the burning of incense. Between these formal ceremonies, priests attended to the practical maintenance of the temple, copying sacred texts, managing the temple's considerable economic holdings, and preparing for the great festivals that marked the Egyptian calendar. The priesthood itself was carefully organized into a hierarchy that reflected the stratified nature of Egyptian society. At the top stood the high priest, often appointed by the pharaoh himself from among the nobility. Below him served a complex array of specialized priests, each with particular duties. Some tended to the daily offerings. Others maintained the sacred texts. Still others supervised the temple workshops and farms that provided the temple's income. Most temple priests did not serve full-time. Instead, they worked in rotating shifts called Pharaohs, each serving for 1 month out of every 4. During their month of service, they lived at the temple, maintaining strict standards of ritual purity. They shaved their entire bodies, bathed multiple times daily in the sacred lake, wore only clean linen garments, and abstained from certain foods. During their 3 months off duty, however, they returned to ordinary life, working at other professions and living with their families. Women also served important roles in temple life, though their positions were generally separate from those of male priests. Some women served as musicians, playing sistrums and singing hymns during ceremonies. Others held the title of chanteress or songstress of a particular deity. The wife of the high priest often held the title God's wife, a position of considerable prestige and influence. The great temples functioned as far more than religious centers. They were economic powerhouses, controlling vast estates of agricultural land, workshops producing everything from linen cloth to stone vessels, and fleets of boats that transported goods along the Nile. Temples employed not just priests, but farmers, craftsmen, scribes, guards, and laborers. Some of Egypt's largest temples controlled wealth that rivaled the pharaoh's own treasury. Within the temple complexes, scribes maintained extensive libraries of papyrus scrolls, recording not just religious texts, but also medical knowledge, mathematical calculations, astronomical observations, and administrative records. Young men came to study in these institutions, learning to read and write, studying mathematics and literature, preparing for careers in Egypt's bureaucracy. The temples thus served as centers of learning, preserving and transmitting knowledge across generations. The great festivals brought the temples to life in ways that ordinary Egyptians could witness and participate in. During these celebrations, the god's statue, hidden within a portable shrine, would be carried forth in procession on the shoulders of priests. The people could approach the shrine with questions, seeking divine guidance. The statue's movements, as interpreted by the priests, provided answers to legal disputes, confirmed appointments to office, or offered predictions about the future. As night fell over the temple, the last rituals completed, the high priest would again approach the sanctuary. He would seal the shrine's doors, press his seal into fresh clay, and back away, sweeping the floor with a broom to erase his footprints. The god was left in darkness and silence until the next dawn, when the cycle would begin anew. And beyond the temple walls, the Nile continued its eternal flow, while Egypt's people slept beneath the stars, confident that the priests maintained the cosmic order upon which all existence depended. As the great temples stood in their magnificence, maintaining their timeless rituals and festivals, the land of Egypt was about to enter a period of profound transformation. The centuries following the Middle Kingdom had not been easy ones for the people of the Nile. Around 1650 BCE, foreign rulers known as the Hyksos had established themselves in the Delta region, bringing with them new technologies and different ways of ruling that challenged the traditional order of the two lands. The Hyksos, whose name means rulers of foreign lands, had arrived gradually, settling first as traders and migrants from the eastern Mediterranean and the Levant. Over time, they grew in number and influence until they controlled much of Lower Egypt, establishing their capital at Avaris in the eastern delta. They brought with them the horse and chariot, bronze working techniques, and new designs for weapons and fortifications. Yet they also adopted many Egyptian customs, writing their names in hieroglyphs and honoring Egyptian gods alongside their own deities. For more than a century, Egypt remained divided. The Hyksos controlled the north, while Egyptian rulers maintained power in Thebes and Upper Egypt, paying tribute to their foreign overlords, but preserving their traditional culture and religious practices. This arrangement, uncomfortable as it was, might have continued indefinitely had it not been for the ambitions of a series of remarkable rulers from Thebes. The princes of Thebes watched and waited, building their strength in secret. They trained armies, forged alliances with Nubian kingdoms to the south, and prepared for the day when they might reclaim the entire land of Egypt. The struggle for liberation began in earnest with a ruler named Sekenenre Tao, whose mummy bears witness to the violence of this conflict, showing wounds that suggest he fell in battle against the Hyksos forces. His son Kamose took up the cause with fierce determination, launching campaigns northward along the Nile, recapturing towns and fortresses. Ancient inscriptions record his pride in these victories, describing how he pushed the boundaries of Theban control ever closer to the delta. Yet it would be Kamose's successor, his younger brother Ahmose, who would finally complete the liberation and earn the distinction of founding Egypt's 18th dynasty around 1550 BCE. Ahmose pursued the Hyksos relentlessly, besieging their strongholds and driving them from Egyptian soil. After capturing Avaris, he followed the retreating Hyksos into southern Canaan, ensuring they could not regroup and return. His military campaigns were recorded by soldiers who served under him, their autobiographies carved on tomb walls, providing vivid accounts of these momentous events. One such soldier, also named Ahmose, but distinguished as Ahmose, son of Ebana, described participating in the siege of Avaris and receiving rewards of gold and servants for his bravery. With the Hyksos expelled, Ahmose turned his attention to reunifying all of Egypt under Theban rule and restoring the traditions that had been disrupted. He rebuilt temples, reinstated religious festivals, and rewarded those who had remained loyal during the years of division. The capital of Egypt now shifted to Thebes in the south, the city whose god Amun had sustained the resistance and would now rise to become the most powerful deity in the Egyptian pantheon. But Ahmose understood that simply driving out foreign rulers was not enough to ensure Egypt's security. The experience of Hyksos domination had taught a crucial lesson that Egypt could no longer afford to remain isolated, concerned only with its own borders and internal affairs. To prevent future invasions, Egypt would need to project power beyond its traditional boundaries, creating buffer zones and establishing influence over neighboring regions. This realization marked a fundamental shift in Egyptian foreign policy, where previous kingdoms had generally focused on controlling Nubia to the south for its gold and other resources, while maintaining only limited engagement with Asia to the northeast. The new kingdom would pursue a more aggressive and expansive approach. Ahmose himself campaigned in Nubia to reassert Egyptian authority there, and his successors would extend Egyptian influence deep into Syria and Palestine. The pharaohs who followed Ahmose continued this transformation. His son, Amenhotep I, pushed further into Nubia and maintained Egypt's Asian territories, while also undertaking significant building projects and establishing the village that would house the workers who constructed the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Thutmose I, who came next, led Egyptian armies to the Euphrates River in Mesopotamia, an unprecedented extension of Egyptian power, while also expanding control southward into Nubia beyond the Third Cataract. These military campaigns brought tremendous wealth flowing into Egypt. Tribute from subject territories, trade goods from distant lands, and precious materials like cedar wood from Lebanon transformed Thebes into a magnificent capital. The temple of Amun at Karnak began its expansion into the vast complex it would eventually become, as grateful pharaohs dedicated portions of their foreign wealth to the god who had delivered them from the Hyksos and granted them victory in distant lands. The army itself became a more professional and permanent institution during this period, where earlier Egyptian armies had been largely temporary forces of conscripted farmers and workers. The new kingdom developed a standing military with career soldiers, specialized units, and sophisticated organization. The chariot, adopted from the Hyksos themselves, became the elite arm of the Egyptian military, with young nobles training extensively in chariot warfare and archery. Yet the new kingdom was not built on military might alone. The same pharaohs who led armies also sponsored artistic and architectural projects, encouraged trade expeditions, and supported the complex bureaucracy that administered their expanded realm. They understood that true power required not just the ability to conquer, but also the wisdom to govern, the wealth to build, and the cultural confidence to absorb new influences while maintaining Egyptian identity. As evening settles over the Nile and the sun god Ra completes another journey across the sky, we can imagine the transformation that must have filled the hearts of Egyptians who witnessed this rebirth. After generations of division and foreign rule, the two lands were united once more under native pharaohs, whose power extended farther than ever before. The new kingdom had emerged, and Egypt stood at the threshold of its greatest age, ready to write new chapters in its long and magnificent story. The stage was now set for rulers of extraordinary ambition and vision, including a remarkable woman who would soon claim the throne and demonstrate that the power of the pharaohs knew no bounds of tradition or expectation. As the 18th dynasty flourished, and Egypt's borders expanded under the rule of powerful warrior pharaohs, the throne passed through several generations until it came to rest in the hands of a most remarkable ruler. Around 1479 BCE, a woman named Hatshepsut would ascend to become not merely a regent or a queen consort, but a fully crowned pharaoh of Egypt, wearing the double crown and ruling with an authority that would endure for more than 2 decades. Hatshepsut's path to power was complex and gradual. She was born into royalty as the daughter of Thutmose I, a pharaoh who had expanded Egypt's territories and secured its prosperity. When her father died, she married her half-brother Thutmose II, as was customary in royal families, seeking to keep the bloodline pure and the succession clear. As his great royal wife, she held significant influence in the court, but her husband's reign was relatively brief, and his health, according to evidence from his mummy, was not robust. When Thutmose II died, the succession fell to a young boy, Thutmose III, who was born to one of the pharaoh's lesser wives. This child was too young to rule effectively, and Hatshepsut stepped forward as regent, guiding the kingdom as the boy grew. For a few years she governed in this traditional role, a respected and capable administrator, managing the affairs of state. But somewhere around the 7th year of young Thutmose III's nominal reign, something extraordinary happened. Hatshepsut declared herself pharaoh. This transformation required careful presentation to a society where pharaohs were traditionally male and were considered living gods, the embodiment of Horus on earth. Hatshepsut and her advisors crafted a narrative that emphasized her divine right to rule. Temple inscriptions declared that the god Amun himself had fathered her, appearing to her mother in divine form. Artistic depictions began to show her wearing the traditional regalia of kingship, including the false beard that symbolized pharaonic authority. Sometimes she was depicted with a male body, wearing the royal kilt and crown. At other times, inscriptions referred to her with both male and female pronouns. as if the office of pharaoh transcended gender itself. Rather than pursuing aggressive military campaigns like many of her predecessors and successors, Hatshepsut's reign is remembered for its remarkable prosperity, ambitious building projects, and far-reaching trading expeditions. She understood that Egypt's wealth could grow not only through conquest, but through commerce and careful stewardship of resources. The Nile continued its annual flooding, the granaries remained full, and peace largely prevailed throughout the land. One of her most celebrated achievements was the great trading expedition to the mysterious land of Punt, which took place around the 9th year of her reign. Punt, located somewhere along the Red Sea coast, perhaps in what is now Somalia or Eritrea, was a source of exotic goods that Egyptians treasured. 5 ships sailed south along the Red Sea, carrying Egyptian goods to trade for frankincense, myrrh, ebony, gold, ivory, and living myrrh trees, with their roots carefully preserved in baskets for transplanting. The journey to Punt was commemorated in beautiful relief carvings on the walls of Hatshepsut's mortuary temple, showing the ships being loaded, the journey across the water, and the delegation's arrival in Punt. The reliefs depict the houses of Punt built on stilts, the native people bringing their goods to trade, and even the queen of Punt with her distinctive appearance. The expedition returned triumphantly, and Hatshepsut presented the precious myrrh trees to the god Amun, planting them on the terraces of her temple where they could scent the air with their aromatic resin. That temple, known today as Deir el-Bahari, remains one of the most breathtaking architectural achievements of ancient Egypt. Nestled against the golden cliffs of the Western Desert, across the Nile from the city of Thebes, this mortuary temple rose in 3 massive terraces, connected by long ramps. Colonnaded porticos provided shade and grace, their columns elegant and precisely proportioned. The temple integrated harmoniously with the natural rock formations behind it, as if the building grew organically from the cliff face itself. The architect responsible for this masterpiece was Senenmut, one of Hatshepsut's most trusted officials. He held numerous titles and oversaw many of her building projects throughout Egypt. The relationship between pharaoh and architect appears to have been one of deep trust and shared vision. Senenmut's own tomb, though never completed, was tunneled deep beneath the forecourt of Hatshepsut's temple, an unusual honor that suggests the high regard in which she held him. Throughout Egypt, Hatshepsut sponsored construction and restoration work. At the great temple complex of Karnak in Thebes, she erected a pair of magnificent red granite obelisks, their tips covered in electrum, a mixture of gold and silver that would catch the sun's rays and gleam like fire. These obelisks were among the tallest ever raised in Egypt, monuments to her devotion to Amun and symbols of her power. One still stands today, a testament to ancient engineering and ambition. Trade routes flourished during her reign, not only to Punt, but also to Sinai for turquoise and copper, to Nubia for gold, and throughout the Mediterranean. Egypt's workshops produced fine goods, and foreign delegations brought tribute and gifts to the pharaoh's court. The economy thrived in this atmosphere of stability and commercial exchange. Yet despite the evident success of her reign, Hatshepsut's memory faced challenges after her death. Around 1458 BCE, she passed from this world, and Thutmose III, who had nominally shared the throne with her for over 20 years, became sole ruler. He would prove to be one of Egypt's greatest military pharaohs, expanding the empire through numerous campaigns. Some years into his sole reign, perhaps 2 decades after Hatshepsut's death, many of her images and inscriptions were systematically erased or modified. Her cartouches were chiseled from monuments, statues were defaced or buried, and her name was sometimes replaced with those of her father, husband, or nephew. The reasons for this erasure remain debated among scholars. It may have been an attempt to clarify the royal succession, removing an anomaly from the official record. It might have reflected changing political needs or the influence of factions at court. Whatever the motivation, the erasure was never complete. Enough remained for modern archaeologists to piece together the story of this remarkable woman who ruled Egypt during one of its most prosperous and peaceful periods. As sleep begins to find you, imagine those fragrant myrrh trees on the temple terraces, their scent drifting on the warm Egyptian breeze. Picture the great ships returning from Punt with their precious cargo, sailing up the Nile toward Thebes. See the massive obelisks catching the morning sun, their gilded peaks blazing like beacons. In this time of peace and prosperity, Egypt flourished under a pharaoh whose legacy would be remembered not for military conquests, but for wisdom, commerce, and some of the most beautiful architecture the ancient world would ever know. The peaceful prosperity that marked Hatshepsut's reign would give way to a period of profound transformation under a pharaoh whose vision would shake the very foundations of Egyptian religious life. In the 14th century, before the Common Era, a young prince ascended to the throne with the traditional name Amenhotep, meaning Amun is satisfied. Yet within a few years of his coronation, this ruler would reject that name, along with the entire religious establishment that had sustained Egypt for over a millennium. The new pharaoh initially followed conventional paths, honoring the great god Amun and the multitude of deities who populated the Egyptian cosmos. He ruled from Thebes, where the massive temple complex at Karnak stood as a testament to Amun's supreme position among the gods. The priesthood of Amun had grown enormously wealthy and powerful over the centuries, controlling vast estates and wielding considerable influence over royal affairs. But something stirred within the young pharaoh's mind, a vision of divinity that departed radically from everything his ancestors had believed in. Around the 5th year of his reign, approximately 1348 BCE, the pharaoh began promoting the worship of a deity called the Aten, represented as the sun disk itself. Unlike the traditional sun god Ra, depicted with a falcon's head, or the powerful Amun-Ra, who combined multiple divine aspects, the Aten was shown simply as a circle with rays extending downward, each ray ending in a small hand. These hands reached toward the royal family, offering the Ankh symbol of life directly to the pharaoh and his queen. This theological shift accelerated with stunning speed. The pharaoh changed his own name from Amenhotep to Akhenaten, meaning effective for the Aten. He declared that the Aten was not merely the supreme deity among many, but the sole god worthy of worship. The temples to other gods were closed, their rituals suspended, their names chiseled from monuments throughout Egypt. For a civilization that had always embraced a rich multiplicity of divine beings, each with their own stories and sacred places. This represented nothing less than a revolution. To establish his new religious order away from the traditional centers of power, Akhenaten founded an entirely new capital city. He chose a site in Middle Egypt where no major settlement had existed before, a crescent of desert bordered by cliffs on the east bank of the Nile. The location, he declared, belonged to no other god and had never been claimed as sacred territory. Here he would build a city dedicated exclusively to the Aten, a place where the new truth could flourish without the interference of the old priesthoods. The construction of this new capital, which Akhenaten named Akhenaten, meaning horizon of the Aten, proceeded with remarkable urgency. Within just a few years, a complete royal city emerged from the desert sands. The modern site, known as Amarna, has provided archaeologists with an extraordinary window into this unique period. Unlike other Egyptian cities that were continuously occupied and rebuilt over centuries, Amarna was inhabited for barely more than a decade, then abandoned and never resettled, preserving a snapshot of life during Akhenaten's reign. The city stretched for several miles along the river, its boundaries marked by carved inscriptions on the surrounding cliffs. At its heart stood the great temple to the Aten, designed quite differently from traditional Egyptian temples. Rather than being enclosed in darkness with the divine image hidden in an inner sanctuary, this temple was open to the sky, filled with offering tables where the rays of the sun could touch the gifts presented to the Aten. Nearby rose the great palace, connected by a bridge to the smaller king's house, where Akhenaten and his family conducted the business of ruling Egypt. Alongside the pharaoh in this transformation stood his principal wife, Queen Nefertiti, whose name means "the beautiful one has come." She appears prominently in the art of Amarna, often shown the same size as her husband, participating directly in religious rituals and receiving the life-giving rays of the Aten. Images show her making offerings, driving a chariot, and even smiting enemies in poses traditionally reserved for the pharaoh alone. Together with Akhenaten, she raised 6 daughters whose names all incorporated the word Aten. The artistic style that developed at Amarna departed as dramatically from tradition as the religious changes. For over 1,000 years, Egyptian art had portrayed the human form according to strict conventions of idealized proportion and dignity. The artists of Amarna abandoned these ancient rules, creating images that emphasized unusual physical features. Akhenaten appears in reliefs and statues with an elongated face, thick lips, a long neck, a pronounced belly, and wide hips. Some scholars have suggested these images reflect actual physical characteristics, perhaps related to a medical condition, while others believe they represent a symbolic artistic language meant to convey the pharaoh's unique role as intermediary between humanity and the divine. Whatever the intention, this distinctive style extended beyond the royal family to influence how all people were portrayed in Amarna art. The scenes carved on tomb walls and painted in palace chambers show an informality previously unknown in Egyptian art. The royal family appears in intimate domestic moments, playing with their daughters, embracing one another, eating meals together. These glimpses of apparent affection and everyday life create a sense of accessibility, quite different from the remote majesty typically associated with pharaohs. Life in Amarna centered entirely on the worship of the Aten and service to the royal family. Courtiers who followed Akhenaten to his new city built tombs in the cliffs surrounding the site, decorating them not with the traditional scenes of the afterlife journey, but with images of the king and queen worshipping the Aten. Hymns composed to praise the sun disk celebrated its role as creator and sustainer of all life, describing how the Aten brings the dawn, makes plants grow, and cares for all creatures from the smallest chick to the most distant foreign lands. Yet even as the royal court embraced these new teachings, evidence suggests that ordinary Egyptians quietly maintained their old beliefs. Excavations of workers' houses at Amarna have uncovered small statues and amulets depicting traditional household gods like Bes and Taweret, protectors of women and children. The common people, it seems, found it difficult to abandon deities who had guarded their ancestors for countless generations, regardless of royal decrees. The practical effects of Akhenaten's religious revolution created significant disruption throughout Egypt. Temples that had operated for centuries as economic centers, employing thousands of people, suddenly closed. The network of festivals that had structured the year and brought communities together ceased. The vast infrastructure of religious life, which had provided not only spiritual meaning, but also social organization and economic stability, found itself dismantled by royal command. Beyond Egypt's borders, the consequences of Akhenaten's focus on religious transformation may have been even more serious. Letters discovered at Amarna, written on clay tablets by rulers of cities in Syria and Canaan, reveal a growing sense of alarm. These vassal kings pleaded for Egyptian military support against various threats, but their requests appear to have gone largely unanswered, as Akhenaten concentrated on establishing his new religious order rather than maintaining Egypt's international power. As the years passed in the unusual city by the Nile, with its open-air temples and its singular devotion to the sun disk, the seeds of the revolution's undoing were already taking root. The old priesthoods waited in their silenced temples. The foreign territories began to slip from Egyptian control, and the ancient rhythms of religious life that had sustained the civilization for so long continued to pulse beneath the surface of official change. The extraordinary experiment at Amarna would prove as fragile as it was revolutionary, and soon the pendulum would swing back toward tradition with equal force. The revolution of Akhenaten had shaken Egypt to its core, upending centuries of religious tradition and transforming the very appearance of royal art and architecture. But revolutions, even those led by divine kings, rarely survive their architects. When Akhenaten's reign ended, the old ways beckoned like a comfortable home after a long, uncertain journey. Into this world of transition came a child whose name would become the most famous in all of ancient Egypt, though not for reasons anyone of his time could have imagined. He was born with the name Tutankhamun, meaning the living image of the Aten, a testament to the solar deity his predecessor had championed so fervently. But this boy, ascending to the throne at approximately 9 years of age, around 1332 BCE, would soon change his name to Tutankhamun, honoring instead the ancient god Amun, whose worship Akhenaten had sought to suppress. Imagine a child, barely old enough to understand the weight of the double crown, suddenly responsible for guiding an entire kingdom. The young pharaoh would have been surrounded by advisors, powerful men who had weathered the storms of religious upheaval and now saw an opportunity to restore the old order. Chief among these advisors was E, an elderly official who may have been related to the royal family, and Horemheb, a military commander whose influence would only grow with time. The Boy King's reign began with a great restoration. The abandoned city of Amarna, Akhenaten's gleaming capital, dedicated to the Aten, was gradually forsaken as the court returned to the traditional centers of Memphis and Thebes. The temples of Amun, which had stood neglected or even desecrated during the previous reign, began to receive royal attention once more. Craftsmen and laborers were commissioned to repair what had been damaged, and the vast temple complexes slowly came back to life with the sounds of ritual and ceremony. A stela erected during Tutankhamun's reign, known as the Restoration Stela, describes the condition of Egypt when he ascended the throne. The temples of the gods and goddesses had fallen into ruin, it proclaimed, their shrines overgrown and abandoned. The gods, it seemed, had turned their backs on the land, and prayers went unanswered. But now, under the young king's guidance, order would be restored. New statues were carved, covered in gold and precious stones. Offerings flowed once again to the divine images, and the priesthoods resumed their sacred duties. We can picture the young Tutankhamun participating in ceremonies whose meanings he was only beginning to understand, speaking words written for him by learned priests, making gestures taught to him by patient tutors. The machinery of Egyptian religion, so disrupted by his predecessor's radical vision, slowly resumed its ancient rhythm, like a great water wheel returning to its eternal rotation beside the Nile. The boy king married young, as was the custom for pharaohs. His wife was Ankhesenamun, likely a daughter of Akhenaten, making her perhaps his half-sister in the complicated web of royal relationships. She had been born Ankhesenparten and changed her name alongside her husband, another sign of the return to traditional ways. Together, this young couple represented hope for continuity, for a return to the familiar patterns that had sustained Egypt for countless generations. Despite the restoration of the old religious order, Tutankhamun's reign was not a simple reversal of everything Akhenaten had done. The art of the period retained some of the naturalism and intimacy that had characterized the Amarna style. Images of the young king and his queen show them in relaxed, affectionate poses that would have been unusual in earlier times. The rigid formality of Old Kingdom art had been softened by Akhenaten's revolution, and this gentler approach survived, blended now with traditional themes and iconography. The young pharaoh's building projects, though not as extensive as those of longer reigning monarchs, contributed to temples throughout Egypt. At Karnak, the great temple complex of Amun at Thebes, construction resumed after the interruption of the Amarna period. At Luxor, work continued on the magnificent temple that would become one of Egypt's most beautiful religious sites. These projects employed thousands of workers and demonstrated that Egypt's wealth and organizational capabilities remained intact despite recent upheavals. Tutankhamun's reign lasted approximately 10 years, a brief span that saw him grow from child to young man. The exact circumstances of his death, around 1323 BCE, have been the subject of much speculation and study. Modern examinations of his mummy have revealed various health issues and injuries, but the precise cause of his death remains uncertain. What we know is that he died young, perhaps around 19 years of age, bringing his short reign to an unexpected end. Had history proceeded normally, Tutankhamun would have been buried, mourned, and gradually forgotten, remembered only as a minor king who helped restore tradition after a period of disruption. His tomb in the Valley of the Kings, that great necropolis where New Kingdom pharaohs were laid to rest, would have been robbed in antiquity like nearly all the others, its treasures scattered or melted down, its mummy disturbed by thieves seeking the gold and jewels wrapped within the linen bandages. But fate, or perhaps simply chance, had other plans. Tutankhamun's tomb, designated by modern archaeologists as Cave Yistitu, was located in a low-lying area of the Valley of the Kings. Later construction activity, particularly the excavation of the tomb of Ramesses VI nearby, caused debris and stone chips to cascade down the slope, gradually burying the entrance to the young king's final resting place. Over the centuries, this protective covering kept the tomb hidden from the robbers, who systematically plundered the valley's other tombs. Though there is evidence that thieves entered the tomb shortly after the burial, they were apparently interrupted, and the tomb was resealed, leaving its contents largely intact for over 3,000 years. And so Tutankhamun rested in darkness, surrounded by the goods deemed necessary for his journey through the afterlife, while above him the world transformed in ways he could never have imagined. Dynasties rose and fell. Foreign powers conquered and were expelled, and eventually Egypt itself became a province of distant empires. The very ability to read the hieroglyphic inscriptions on his coffins and shrine was lost to time. The young king who had restored the old gods and returned Egypt to its traditional ways became himself a mystery, waiting in silence for a discovery that would make his name echo across the modern world more loudly than that of any pharaoh who reigned longer or achieved greater deeds. But that discovery, and the extraordinary treasures it would reveal, lay millennia in the future, when a different kind of explorer would come seeking the secrets of ancient Egypt. For now, as Tutankhamun's reign drew to its close, Egypt stood poised at another transition, ready to move forward under new leadership into an era that would see the kingdom reach heights of power and influence that even the great pyramid builders might have envied. The young pharaoh who had restored the old gods and returned the capital to Thebes passed into the afterlife, and with him ended a turbulent chapter in Egypt's story. The throne passed through brief reigns until a new dynasty emerged, bringing with it a ruler who would become synonymous with ancient Egypt itself. His name was Ramesses, but history would remember him as Ramesses the Great, and his reign would stretch across 66 years of building, battle, and boundless ambition. When Ramesses II ascended to the throne around 1279 BCE, he was still a young man, perhaps in his mid-20s. His father, Seti I, had already begun restoring Egypt's power and prestige, but the son would surpass the father in almost every measure. What made Ramesses truly great was not merely his accomplishments, impressive though they were, but the sheer duration of his reign. To rule for 66 years in an age when life itself was precarious was extraordinary. Ramesses would outlive many of his own children, witness the rise of new generations, and shape Egypt so profoundly that his mark would remain visible for millennia to come. From the beginning, Ramesses understood the power of monuments. Stone was eternal, or nearly so, and a pharaoh who carved his name deep into temple walls and colossal statues would be remembered long after mortal memory faded. He embarked on a building program that dwarfed those of most other pharaohs, adding to existing temples and constructing new ones throughout Egypt and the lands it controlled. His cartouche, that oval frame containing his royal name, appears on more monuments than any other pharaohs. So many that early Egyptologists sometimes struggled to believe one ruler could have been responsible for such abundance. Perhaps nowhere is Ramesses' vision more dramatically realized than at Abu Simbel, far to the south in Nubia, where the Nile curves through golden sandstone cliffs. Here, workers carved two temples directly from the living rock of the mountainside. The larger temple's facade features 4 colossal seated statues of Ramesses himself, each rising about 65 feet in height. The pharaoh sits in eternal majesty, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, gazing out across the waters. Between and beside the giants stand smaller figures of the royal family, though even these smaller statues tower above human height. The sheer scale creates an impression of divine power, made manifest in stone. The interior of the Great Temple extends nearly 200 feet into the mountain. Visitors pass through a series of halls, their walls covered with carved and painted scenes depicting Ramesses' military victories and religious devotion. The ceiling of the first hall rests on 8 pillars, each fronted by a standing statue of the pharaoh represented as Osiris, god of the afterlife, complete with the crossed arms and royal regalia. Deeper into the mountain, the passages narrow, drawing the visitor toward the sanctuary at the heart of the temple. Here, carved from the rear wall, sit 4 gods: Ra, Horakhti, Ptah, Amun-Ra, and Ramesses himself, deified and taking his place among the immortals. The temple's design incorporated a celestial alignment that demonstrates the sophisticated knowledge of ancient Egyptian architects. Twice each year, on dates that modern scholars believe correspond to Ramesses' coronation and birth, the rising sun's rays penetrate the entire length of the temple and illuminate the 4 statues in the sanctuary. For a few precious minutes, sunlight touches the faces of the gods and the deified pharaoh, while the statue of Ptah, associated with the underworld, remains in shadow. This astronomical precision, achieved through careful calculation and exact positioning, transformed the temple into a cosmic instrument linking heaven and earth. The second temple at Abu Simbel was dedicated to the goddess Hathor and to Ramesses' principal wife, Nefertari. Its facade features 6 standing colossal figures, about 30 feet tall, with statues of Ramesses and Nefertari standing in equal size, a remarkable honor for a queen. The temple's walls celebrate Nefertari's beauty and her role as a goddess on earth, and the care lavished on this monument speaks to the genuine affection the pharaoh held for his great royal wife. Beyond building, Ramesses involved himself in military campaigns that extended Egyptian influence and secured its borders. His most famous military engagement occurred at Kadesh in Syria around 1274 BCE, where Egyptian forces clashed with the Hittite Empire, the other great power of the age. The battle itself was likely inconclusive, with both sides claiming victory. But Ramesses ensured that Egyptian accounts of the engagement portrayed him as a heroic warrior who turned near disaster into triumph through personal courage and divine favor. The story of Kadesh appears on temple walls throughout Egypt, telling how the young pharaoh, abandoned by his troops, called upon the god Amun and single-handedly turned the tide of battle. What matters more than the battle's outcome was what followed. After years of competition and conflict, Egypt and the Hittites negotiated a peace treaty, one of the earliest recorded international agreements in history. This treaty, dating to around 1259 BCE, established borders, promised mutual defense, and arranged for the extradition of refugees. Copies were made in both Egyptian hieroglyphics and Hittite cuneiform, and the agreement held for the remainder of Ramesses' reign. It was sealed by a diplomatic marriage when a Hittite princess journeyed to Egypt to join the pharaoh's household, cementing the alliance between former enemies. Ramesses' family life was as expansive as his building projects. He maintained a large household of wives and fathered an estimated 100 children or more, though precise numbers are uncertain. After Nefertari's passing, other wives rose in prominence, and the king's many sons and daughters filled positions throughout Egyptian administration and religious life. The challenge of succession became complex as older sons died before their father, and Ramesses outlived many of those he had expected to inherit the throne. Finally, it would be his 13th son, Meneptah, already an elderly man himself, who would become pharaoh after his father's passing. In his later years, Ramesses continued to supervise building projects and maintain his presence throughout Egypt. He established a new capital city in the Delta region called Pi Ramesses, situated strategically for controlling trade routes and maintaining military readiness. The city grew large and prosperous, filled with palaces, temples, and workshops, though its remains are now scattered and difficult to trace, as later rulers dismantled its structures for building materials elsewhere. When Ramesses finally passed into the afterlife around 1213 BCE, he was approximately 90 years old, an almost unprecedented age for the time. His mummified body, later discovered among other royal mummies, moved in ancient times for protection from tomb robbers, shows that he suffered from arthritis and dental problems in his final years. But his preservation allows us to look upon the face of a pharaoh who walked the earth over 3,000 years ago. Ramesses had shaped Egypt's landscape so thoroughly that his successors struggled to emerge from his shadow. For generations after, pharaohs would compare themselves to Ramesses the Great, and his monuments would stand as standards against which all other building projects were measured. He had made himself eternal through stone and story, and as you drift towards sleep, you might imagine those colossal statues at Abu Simbel still keeping their vigil over the Nile, unchanged and unchanging, patient witnesses to the flowing of countless sunrises across the desert sands. As the sun set each evening over the monuments Ramesses had built, casting long shadows across temple walls and colonnades, the workshops of Egypt continued their timeless rhythms. In these spaces, both humble and grand, artisans shaped the visual language that would define ancient Egypt for thousands of years. The work of countless hands, guided by conventions passed down through generations, created objects of extraordinary beauty that served both the living and the dead. The artisan's world began with apprenticeship, often within family workshops, where skills transferred from father to son, from master craftsman to eager student. Young boys would start by grinding pigments, preparing surfaces, or holding tools, gradually learning the exacting standards their profession demanded. In the villages built to house workers near major construction sites, entire communities revolved around specialized crafts. Some families carved stone for generations, while others dedicated themselves to metalwork, woodworking, or the delicate art of faience production. Egyptian art followed strict conventions that might seem limiting to modernize. Yet within these boundaries, craftsmen found endless opportunities for creativity and expression. Figures in paintings and reliefs appeared in a distinctive style, with heads shown in profile, while eyes gazed out as if viewed from the front. Shoulders faced forward, even as legs strode in profile. This approach was not primitive or unskilled, but rather a sophisticated system designed to show each element of the human form in its most recognizable aspect. The goal was not to capture a momentary impression, but to create an eternal, complete representation that would serve its purpose for eternity. The materials available to Egyptian artisans shaped what they could create. Limestone, quarried from cliffs along the Nile, provided an excellent medium for relief carving. Softer than granite, but durable enough to last millennia, limestone covered temple walls and tomb chambers with endless scenes of daily life, religious rituals, and offerings to the gods. For the finest work, sculptors turned to harder stones. Granite from Aswan, black basalt, or the dark grey wacke called Beckenstone challenged the craftsman's skill, but rewarded patient work with surfaces that could be polished to extraordinary smoothness. In the sculptor's workshop, the transformation of stone followed careful steps. First came the preliminary sketch, laid out on the block surface with red paint. Master artists would then review the proportions, making corrections in black. The carvers would rough out the basic forms with copper or bronze chisels, using wooden mallets to drive the tools through the stone. Harder stones required even harder tools, and Egyptian craftsmen employed dolerite pounders, dense igneous rocks that could fracture granite through patient, repeated blows. As the form emerged, finer chisels refined the details, and finally, abrasive sand combined with water allowed artisans to polish surfaces until they gleamed. Painters brought these stone surfaces to vivid life with colors that still shine in protected tomb chambers today. Egyptian artists created their palette from the world around them. Black came from soot or charcoal, white from chalk or gypsum. Yellow emerged from ochre, a natural clay colored by iron oxide. Red came from ochre rich in iron, while brown could be created by mixing or by using certain desert clays. Blue, highly prized, came from a synthetic pigment called Egyptian blue, created by heating a mixture of silica, copper, calcium, and natron. This remarkable invention, produced in specialized workshops, gave Egyptian art its characteristic vivid azure tones. Green might come from ground malachite, or from mixing blue and yellow. These pigments were mixed with water and a binding medium, perhaps gum arabic or egg white, then applied with brushes made from palm fiber or reed. The painter's skill lay not only in steady hands, but but in understanding how colors would appear on different surfaces, how to layer them effectively, and how to create the flat, bold areas of color that characterize Egyptian painting. In tombs especially, these paintings served a purpose beyond decoration. They ensured that the deceased would have everything depicted available in the afterlife, so accuracy and completeness mattered tremendously. Jewelry making represented another pinnacle of Egyptian craftsmanship. Gold, abundant in the deserts east of the Nile and in Nubia to the south, flowed into workshops where skilled metalworkers transformed it into objects of breathtaking delicacy. Goldsmiths could draw gold into fine wire, hammer it into sheets thin enough to be translucent, or cast it in molds. They developed sophisticated techniques for granulation, creating designs from tiny spheres of gold, and for filigree work using fine gold wire. These elements combined in necklaces, bracelets, rings, and elaborate pectoral ornaments worn on the chest. The jewelry's beauty multiplied when craftsmen added colored stones and other materials. Turquoise from the Sinai, carnelian from the eastern desert, and deep blue lapis lazuli, imported from distant Afghanistan, created vivid color contrasts against gleaming gold. The technique called cloisonné involved creating small compartments in gold framework, then filling them with carefully shaped pieces of semi-precious stone or colored glass, building up intricate patterns and images. The resulting pieces served as both adornment and protection, as many incorporated symbols believed to offer magical defense against harm. Woodworkers faced particular challenges in a land where large trees grew scarce. Native acacia, tamarisk, and sycamore fig provided wood, but these grew in relatively small sizes and irregular shapes. For fine furniture and important items, craftsmen prized imported woods, especially cedar from Lebanon. This fragrant, workable wood arrived in Egypt through trade networks and was reserved for prestigious projects. Egyptian carpenters developed remarkable skill in joinery, creating tight-fitting connections without nails, and in veneering, applying thin layers of fine wood over cores made from less valuable materials. They shaped elegant chairs with legs carved to resemble animal limbs, beds with footboards decorated with protective symbols, and chests inlaid with ivory and ebony in geometric patterns. Faience, a glazed ceramic material with no exact parallel in other ancient cultures, allowed Egyptian craftsmen to create objects with brilliant jewel-like surfaces. Unlike pottery, which was shaped from Nile clay, faience consisted of ground quartz mixed with small amounts of lime and natron, then shaped and fired. During firing, the natron-based glazing compounds on or within the material melted, creating a glossy surface typically in shades of blue or green, though other colors were possible. Artisans shaped faience into beads by the thousands, created small figurines of gods and protective deities, fashioned drinking cups, and made decorative inlays for furniture and walls. The shimmering blue-green color recalled both water and life, making faience symbolically significant beyond its visual appeal. As artisans across Egypt continued their work, generation after generation, they collectively created a visual culture of remarkable consistency and enduring power. The conventions they followed changed gradually over time, responding to new dynasties, foreign influences, and shifting religious emphases. Yet the fundamental approaches remained recognizable across 3 millennia. Their creations were never signed, never attributed to individual genius. The work itself mattered more than the maker, the eternal function more important than temporary fame. Yet through their collective efforts, these unnamed craftsmen shaped how we see ancient Egypt today, leaving us objects of such beauty and skill that they continue to inspire wonder. And as their chisels rang against stone and their brushes moved across fresh plaster, they were simultaneously preserving their world and building the practical knowledge that would serve Egypt in countless other ways, from measuring flood levels to treating ailments. Foundations we will explore as we continue our journey through this remarkable civilization. The artistic mastery we've witnessed in ancient Egypt was matched by an equally impressive command of practical knowledge. As the Nile flowed through the desert, bringing life to the narrow strip of land along its banks, the Egyptians developed sophisticated systems of mathematics and medicine that would serve their civilization for thousands of years and influence countless generations to come. The ancient Egyptians were, above all, practical people. Their mathematics arose not from abstract philosophical inquiry, but from the very real needs of managing a complex agricultural society. Each year, when the Nile's floodwaters receded, the boundaries between fields had to be re-established. Tax collectors needed to calculate how much grain each farmer owed based on the size of their land. Architects required precise measurements to design temples and pyramids that would stand for eternity. From these everyday necessities, Egyptian mathematics was born. The scribes who practiced this mathematical art worked primarily in hieratic script, a simplified cursive form of hieroglyphics, better suited to the rapid notation needed for calculations. They wrote on papyrus scrolls, some of which have survived to our time, offering us windows into their computational world. The most famous of these is the Rhind mathematical papyrus, copied around 1600 years before the Common Era by a scribe named Ahmose, who tells us he is recording knowledge from an even earlier text, one that dates back perhaps 400 years before his own time. In these mathematical texts, we find problems both mundane and surprisingly sophisticated. Egyptian mathematicians could add, subtract, multiply, and divide with considerable skill. They worked comfortably with fractions, though their system differed from ours in a curious way. With the exception of 2/3, which had its own special symbol, Egyptians expressed all fractions as unit fractions, with 1 as the numerator. Rather than writing 3/4, they would write 1/2 plus 1/4. This might seem cumbersome to us, but Egyptian scribes became remarkably adept at manipulating these unit fractions to solve complex problems. Geometry held special importance in Egyptian mathematics. The annual flooding of the Nile created an urgent need to resurvey fields and recalculate areas. The Egyptians could determine the area of rectangles, triangles, and even approximate the area of a circle with impressive accuracy. Their value for pi, derived from measuring circular granaries, was approximately 3.16, remarkably close to the true value. They could calculate the volume of cylindrical granaries to determine how much grain they could store, and they understood the mathematics of slopes, essential for building the precisely angled faces of pyramids. The Moscow mathematical papyrus, another treasure from ancient times, presents even more advanced problems, including one that calculates the volume of a truncated pyramid, a shape that would have been familiar to any Egyptian who had seen the stepped pyramids or the partially completed monuments that dotted the landscape. The solution requires a sophisticated understanding of three-dimensional geometry that speaks to centuries of accumulated knowledge. Egyptian astronomy grew hand in hand with their mathematical skills. The priests observed the heavens with patient dedication, tracking the movements of stars and planets across the night sky. They divided the night into 12 hours, based on the rising of certain stars, and similarly divided the day into 12 hours, giving us a system of timekeeping that still influences us today. They identified the circumpolar stars, those that never set below the horizon, and called them the imperishable ones, eternal watchers in the northern sky. Most importantly, the Egyptians observed the heliacal rising of the star we call Sirius, which they knew as Sopdet. Each year, after a period of invisibility, Sirius would reappear on the eastern horizon just before dawn. This annual return coincided closely with the beginning of the Nile's flood, making it an astronomical event of tremendous practical significance. From these observations, the Egyptians developed a calendar of 365 days, divided into 12 months of 30 days each, with 5 additional days added at the year's end. It was one of the earliest solar calendars, and its basic structure would influence calendar systems throughout the Mediterranean world. In the realm of medicine, Egyptian knowledge was equally practical and remarkably advanced for its time. Egyptian physicians enjoyed fame throughout the ancient world. Foreign rulers would request Egyptian doctors, trusting in their reputation for healing knowledge. This expertise was preserved in medical papyri, collections of observations, diagnoses, and treatments accumulated over many generations. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, dating to around 1600 years before the Common Era, but likely copied from much older sources, reads almost like a modern medical textbook. It proceeds systematically from the head downward, describing various injuries and conditions, offering diagnoses, and suggesting treatments. The text demonstrates a rational, observational approach to medicine. It describes symptoms, examines possible causes, and recommends treatments based on what had proven effective in the past. Egyptian physicians understood that the heart was central to the body's functioning, noting that the pulse could be felt in various parts of the body. They recognized the importance of the heartbeat and understood that it was connected to health, though they did not fully grasp the circulation system as we understand it today. They could identify many organs and understood some of their functions through both medical practice and the mummification process, which gave them intimate knowledge of human anatomy. Treatments combined practical remedies with ritual elements. Egyptian pharmacology utilized an impressive array of substances. They used honey as an antiseptic for wounds, recognizing its healing properties long before modern science explained them. Willow bark, which contains salicylic acid similar to modern aspirin, was used for pain relief. They employed moldy bread on infections, unknowingly using the antibiotic properties of certain molds thousands of years before penicillin would be discovered. Garlic, cumin, fennel, and numerous other plants found their way into Egyptian remedies, many of which contained genuinely beneficial compounds. Egyptian doctors could set broken bones using splints and perform various procedures. They understood the importance of cleanliness in treating wounds and developed techniques for suturing cuts. They could drain abscesses and had developed some surgical instruments recognizable to medical practitioners today. Dentistry was practiced too, as examination of mummies has revealed attempts at dental treatments, though the gritty bread that was a staple of the Egyptian diet caused considerable wear on teeth, creating work for these early dentists. Medical practice in Egypt was often specialized. Some physicians focused on eyes, others on stomachs, still others on teeth. This specialization allowed practitioners to develop deep expertise in particular areas, much as modern medicine does. The title of physician was respected, and the most accomplished could rise to positions of considerable prestige, like Imhotep, the architect of Djoser's pyramid, who was also remembered as a great healer and would eventually be deified as a god of medicine. As we contemplate these achievements in mathematics and medicine, we see a civilization that observed carefully, recorded diligently, and built upon the knowledge of previous generations. The practical wisdom of the Egyptians, born from the needs of their daily lives and refined over thousands of years, represents a gift they gave not only to their own time, but to all of human history. And as night deepens along the Nile and the stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns, we prepare to follow the Egyptians into their deepest mystery, the journey that awaited every person when their time in this world came to an end. As we have seen the remarkable achievements of Egyptian mathematics and medicine, we now turn to perhaps the most profound aspect of this ancient civilization: their elaborate beliefs about death and what lay beyond. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not an ending, but a transformation, a doorway opening onto an eternal existence that required careful preparation and considerable resources to navigate successfully. The Egyptians believed that each person possessed several spiritual components. The Ka was one's life force, a kind of spiritual double that came into being at birth and required sustenance even after death. The Ba was closer to what we might think of as personality or soul, often depicted as a bird with a human head that could move between the tomb and the afterlife. The Aeh represented the transformed, glorified spirit that had successfully passed into the realm of the blessed dead. Preserving the physical body was essential because these spiritual elements needed a place to return to and recognize. This belief gave rise to mummification, one of ancient Egypt's most distinctive practices. The process evolved over centuries, reaching its most sophisticated form during the New Kingdom. When a person of means died, the body was taken to the workshops of specialized embalmers who performed their sacred work in buildings called Hernifa, meaning house of beauty or house of mummification. The embalmers began by washing the body with wine and water from the Nile. Through a small incision in the left side, they carefully removed the internal organs, which would decay most rapidly. The liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines were each treated separately, dried with natron salt, and eventually placed in 4 special containers called canopic jars. Each jar was protected by a different deity. Imseti guarded the liver, Hapi the lungs, Duamutef the stomach, and Kebesenuef the intestines. The heart, however, remained in the body, for the Egyptians considered it the seat of intelligence and emotion, essential for the journey ahead. The body was then covered completely in natron, a naturally occurring mixture of sodium salts found in dried lake beds. This remarkable substance drew out all moisture, preventing decay. For 40 days, the body rested beneath mounds of natron crystals. When this drying period ended, the embalmers cleaned the preserved flesh and began the wrapping process. Using hundreds of yards of linen strips, often torn from household textiles, the embalmers wrapped each finger and toe individually, then the limbs, and finally the entire body. Between the layers, they placed protective amulets, small charms inscribed with prayers, rituals, and spells. The heart scarab was particularly important, inscribed with a spell to prevent the heart from bearing witness against the deceased during judgment. A mask might be placed over the face, rendered in the idealized features of the deceased. For royalty and the very wealthy, these masks gleamed with gold. The entire mummification process took about 70 days, a period during which the family mourned and made preparations for the burial. The funeral itself was an elaborate affair, with professional mourners, often women who wailed and threw dust upon their heads in displays of grief, accompanying the procession to the tomb. But placing a mummified body in a tomb was only the beginning. The Egyptians believed the deceased would need supplies for the afterlife, just as they had needed them in earthly existence. Tombs became houses for eternity, stocked with everything one might require. Food and drink were essential: bread, beer, wine, dried meats, fruits, and vegetables. These offerings were both physical provisions and representations, as paintings on tomb walls could magically transform into actual sustenance through the proper prayers. The deceased would also need furniture: beds, chairs, chests for clothing and linens. They might need tools for their trade or cosmetics for beautification. Wealthy Egyptians filled their tombs with jewelry, games for entertainment, even chariots. King Tutankhamun's tomb, though relatively modest for a pharaoh, contained over 5,000 objects, including golden sandals, board games, and dismantled chariots. Most intriguing were the Shabti figures, small servant statues placed in tombs by the dozens or even hundreds. These figurines, usually made of wood, stone, or faience, were inscribed with a special spell. The Egyptians believed that in the afterlife, one might be called upon to perform labor in the divine fields. When summoned, the Shabti would magically animate and perform the work on behalf of the deceased. Wealthy individuals might include a Shabti for each day of the year, plus overseer Shabtis to manage the workers. To navigate the dangers of the afterlife, the deceased needed guidance, which came in the form of collections of spells and instructions we now call the Book of the Dead. These were not standardized books, but rather customized collections of spells written on papyrus scrolls and placed in the tomb. The spells provided passwords to past guardians, descriptions of the geography of the underworld, and transformations that would allow the deceased to take various forms. The most critical moment in the afterlife journey was the weighing of the heart. According to Egyptian belief, the deceased would stand before Osiris, god of the underworld, and 42 divine judges. The jackal-headed god Anubis would place the dead person's heart on one side of a great scale, balanced against a feather representing Ma'at, truth, justice, and cosmic order. The ibis-headed Thoth stood ready to record the result. If the heart, heavy with wrongdoing, outweighed the feather, it would be devoured by Ammit, a creature part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, and the deceased would cease to exist. But if the heart balanced perfectly with the feather, the deceased was declared true of voice and could enter the field of reeds, a paradise that resembled the best of earthly Egypt: fertile fields beside flowing water, abundant harvests, and peaceful existence among the gods. Even the poorest Egyptians shared these beliefs and prepared as best they could for the afterlife. Those who could not afford elaborate mummification might be buried in the hot desert sand, which naturally preserved bodies. Simple graves held modest pottery vessels with food offerings, and perhaps a few treasured possessions. Rich or poor, the ancient Egyptians faced death with remarkable confidence, having made every possible preparation for the journey ahead. This powerful focus on the afterlife drove much of Egyptian culture: the construction of tombs, the production of funerary goods, the copying of sacred texts, the work of embalmers and priests. It created employment for thousands and motivated the preservation of artistic and religious traditions across centuries. The tombs that these beliefs produced have, ironically, given us our greatest insight into how the ancient Egyptians lived, loved, worked, and dreamed. As we prepare to explore how this magnificent civilization ultimately transformed and passed its wisdom to future generations, we carry with us an understanding of a people who viewed death not with fear, but as a threshold to be crossed with preparation, confidence, and hope. The great civilization that had endured for nearly 3,000 years along the banks of the Nile began to face new challenges as the centuries passed beyond the reign of Ramesses the Great. The immense power and prosperity that had characterized Egypt's golden ages gradually gave way to a more fragmented reality, though the cultural achievements and traditions remained deeply rooted in the land. During what historians call the Third Intermediate Period, beginning around 1070 BCE, Egypt saw its unity fracture once again. The country divided between rulers in the north and south, and foreign dynasties established themselves in various regions. Libyan chieftains took control of parts of the delta, while Nubian kings from the south eventually conquered much of Egypt, forming what became known as the 25th dynasty around 747 BCE. These Nubian pharaohs, far from abandoning Egyptian traditions, embraced them with remarkable enthusiasm, restoring temples, building pyramids in their homeland, and presenting themselves as legitimate successors to the ancient pharaohs. The Assyrian Empire, that powerful force from Mesopotamia, invaded Egypt in the 7th century BCE, briefly occupying the Delta region and even reaching as far south as Thebes. Though their control proved temporary, it demonstrated that Egypt's geographical isolation no longer provided the protection it once had. New military technologies and the rise of vast empires in the Near East meant that the old order was changing. Yet Egypt experienced another remarkable revival during the 26th dynasty, known as the Sate period, beginning around 664 BCE. These rulers, based in the city of Sais in the Delta, managed to reunify the country and initiated a cultural renaissance that looked back to Egypt's glorious past. Artists and craftsmen studied and copied the styles of the Old Kingdom, creating works that deliberately echoed those ancient masterpieces. Temples were restored, trade flourished once more, and for a time it seemed that Egypt had recaptured some of its former glory. This revival, however, faced a new and overwhelming challenge. The Persian Empire, under King Cambyses, conquered Egypt in 525 BCE, incorporating it as a province into their vast domains. The Persians ruled as pharaohs themselves, respecting many Egyptian traditions and customs. But Egypt had undeniably become part of a larger empire rather than an independent power. Some Persian rulers, like Darius I, invested in Egyptian temples and presented themselves as legitimate pharaohs, while others showed less interest in maintaining these traditions. Egypt briefly regained independence during the 4th century BCE, with native Egyptian dynasties ruling once more for about 60 years. These would be the last truly Egyptian pharaohs, and their reigns were marked by constant struggles against the ever-present threat of Persian reconquest. The Persians did indeed return in 343 BCE, establishing control once more, but their second period of rule would be short-lived. In 332 BCE, a young Macedonian king named Alexander arrived in Egypt at the head of a powerful army. He had already defeated the Persian forces in Asia Minor and now liberated Egypt from Persian control. The Egyptians, who had little love for their Persian overlords, welcomed Alexander warmly. He visited the ancient oracle of Amun at the Siwa oasis in the western desert, where the priests proclaimed him the son of the god, following the ancient tradition of divine kingship. Alexander founded a new city on the Mediterranean coast, naming it Alexandria after himself. This city would grow to become one of the great centers of learning and culture in the ancient world. When Alexander died suddenly in 323 BCE, his vast empire was divided among his generals. Egypt fell to Ptolemy, who established a dynasty that would rule for nearly 3 centuries. The Ptolemaic period blended Greek and Egyptian cultures in fascinating ways. The Ptolemies ruled as pharaohs, built temples in traditional Egyptian style, decorated with hieroglyphic inscriptions, and maintained many ancient customs. Yet they also brought Greek language, philosophy, and administrative practices to Egypt. Alexandria became home to the famous library and museum, attracting scholars from across the Mediterranean world. The most famous of the Ptolemaic rulers was Cleopatra VII, who came to power in 51 BCE. She was actually the first of her dynasty to learn the Egyptian language, and she presented herself as the embodiment of the goddess Isis. Her relationships with the Roman leaders, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, represent Egypt's final attempt to maintain independence as Rome grew ever more powerful. After her defeat and death in 30 BCE, Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire, and the age of the pharaohs finally came to an end. Under Roman rule, Egypt served primarily as a grain supplier, the breadbasket that fed the city of Rome itself. The ancient temples continued to function for several more centuries, and traditional Egyptian religion persisted alongside the new beliefs that the Greek and Roman periods had introduced. The last hieroglyphic inscription we know of was carved in 394 CE at the Temple of Isis at Philae, nearly 4,000 years after the script had first been developed. As Christianity spread through the Roman Empire, Egypt became one of its strongholds. and many ancient temples were converted into churches or abandoned. The old knowledge of reading hieroglyphics was gradually lost, and the meaning of those countless inscriptions that covered temple walls and monuments became a mystery. Sand slowly covered many sites, and the great civilization that had flourished for so long faded into legend and half-remembered stories. Yet Egypt never truly disappeared. Its monuments remained, too massive to be hidden completely. The pyramids continued to dominate the horizon at Giza. Travelers and scholars through the centuries wondered at these remnants of a vanished world. When Napoleon's expedition to Egypt in 1798 brought scientists and artists along with soldiers, they documented the temples and tombs they found, rekindling European interest in this ancient civilization. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone during this expedition eventually provided the key to deciphering hieroglyphics, allowing the voices of ancient Egypt to be heard once more. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, archaeologists uncovered tomb after tomb, temple after temple. Each discovery added to our understanding of how ancient Egyptians lived, what they believed, and what they achieved. The civilization that developed along the Nile gave humanity some of its earliest advances in writing, mathematics, medicine, and architecture. The concept of an organized state with complex administration, the idea of monumental stone architecture, and sophisticated religious and philosophical thought all flourished in Egypt's long history. Today, as we look upon the face of the Sphinx or stand before the towering columns of Karnak Temple, we connect with that distant past. The legacy of the pharaohs lives on, not just in museums and archaeological sites, but in the ongoing fascination their civilization inspires. Ancient Egypt reminds us of human creativity, ambition, and the desire to create something that endures beyond a single lifetime. As you drift towards sleep, let your mind wander along those ancient banks of the Nile, where a remarkable civilization once flourished under the bright Egyptian sun, leaving behind wonders that still capture our imagination across the vast expanse of time. As we bring to a close our journey through the sands of ancient Egypt, from the mighty pharaohs and their golden pyramids to the flowing waters of the Nile that gave life to an extraordinary civilization, we hope these ancient stories have gently carried you through the evening. Thank you for joining us on this peaceful exploration of a world long past but never forgotten. If these calm adventures have brought you comfort, we'd love to have you with us again. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below to help other smart sleepers find their way to restful nights. And now, as the night deepens and your mind settles like desert dust at twilight, we wish you the sweetest of dreams. Good night, fellow dreamer, and may your sleep be restful and your dreams be kind.